Chapter 1194. Even the destroyer did not have time to react to the sudden change. What is this? Ling Qian cried out in a daze. An internal strife? Huan Yan, don't tell me you can transform into 9 experts like this at the same time. Buddhist chants rang out incessantly as Buddhist light soared into the sky. Countless Buddhist cultivators fled from the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain in a panic. The mountains were trembling and melting, and in just a few breaths of time, the 7 mountains had turned into 7 huge globs of liquid that looked like melted crystals. 7-colored Buddhist light shrouded the 7 huge liquid balls. The faces of the 7 Buddhas turned blue as they made Buddhist seals and slowly merged into the liquid balls. The Tao-fusing expert of the Holy Alliance, who was shrouded in a plume of purple mist and had his face hazy and indistinct, let out a chuckle. With a wave of his hand, the fist-sized purple flame he had conjured with his natal energy essence drew an arc in the air and smashed heavily into the chest of Zhu Qing, who stood next to him. Yuan Yen, activate the grand array of pure heaven. Capture and kill all these audacious fools. Purple-browed Daozu cried out in a deep voice. Looking gloomily at the 6 celestial emperors, purple-browed Daozu sighed and said, "Are you going to betray the Tao League?" As soon as the grand array of pure heaven was activated, the 18 Tao-fusing experts of the Holy Alliance struck at the same time. They did not use any tricks. Instead, they spat out a mouthful of life essence and mobilized a portion of the power of heaven and earth in the chi of heaven and earth that they had completely controlled. They turned it into the most direct and fundamental attack towards the 9 Tao ancestors. Unhurriedly, purple-browed Daozu put away the pale bracelet, then casually stuck 18 spirit runes on it in a row. The purple flame Zi Zhuosheng had conjured was extremely powerful. It contained not only a high-temperature divine flame, but also an extremely vicious and poisonous aura. Zi Zhuosheng's true form was a large viper with purple stripes and green flowers in the chaos. Not only was he an expert in controlling flames, but he was also an expert in using poison. Among the 18 Tao-fusing experts of the Holy Alliance, he was the only one who could match great horns in flame. Zhu Qing was not the only one who was attacked by her companions, as several almighty experts of the Covenant Alliance, including great horns, had been ambushed by their companions. Zhu Qing's true form was a tranquil spirit bamboo with a wood element, so after being struck by Zi Qingsheng's attack, her body immediately burst into flames. Severely wounded, she let out a long cry and was about to unleash her prime mystic art to fight Zi Zhuosheng to the death. But suddenly, Zi Mei Daozu's body flickered. Together with his 8 clones, he wielded a shining immortal sword and thrust it at Zhu Qing. Everyone's thoughts were changing rapidly, especially the 18 saints and 6 celestial emperors of the Sanctuary Alliance. Their thoughts were moving faster than anyone else's. Suddenly, General Changmu of the Covenant Alliance shouted, "What did those 7 old baldies say? Their spirits were all taken away by someone?" It was their spirit, not the spirit of any one of them. In other words, they originally had 7 spirits. All saints, return to truth. All 9 Daozu performed incantation gestures at the same time and began to recite an incantation in a low voice. Huan Yan was struck dumb as well. He shook his head repeatedly. What kind of joke was this? With his current overall strength, it was easy for him to transform into 1 Tao-fusing expert, but it was impossible for him to transform into 9 Tao-fusing experts at the same time, unless he could restore the overall strength he had when the sacred realm was destroyed. Great Horns, for example, had comprehended and mastered the power of raging fire, and with the help of his natal treasure, he had unleashed a tiny flame that was about 10 feet long and as thick as a thumb. Wherever the faint red flame passed, the void was burned to nothingness, time and space completely disintegrated, and all physical existences were turned into nothingness. Apart from the flame, there was nothing left. A beam of light rushed out of Zhu Qing's body, ripped open the void, and was about to flee. But, how could purple-browed Daozu allow her immortal soul to escape? He let out a long cry, produced a pale bracelet that emitted a cold gleam, and casually pulled Zhu Qing's immortal soul into it. The 6 celestial emperors fell silent for a while, then took a few steps back at the same time. The vast grand array of pure heaven had indeed begun to operate, but instead of surrounding the Holy Alliance and the destroyers, they had surrounded the entire Daluotian army. Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Yen said in a deep voice, "Master, please enlighten us. What kind of treasure is this spirit? We just want to broaden our horizons and see this rare treasure of heaven and earth." All the Daozu kept their mouths shut and said nothing, but their silence confirmed everyone's speculation. The other members of the Holy Alliance also launched their natal attacks. They wanted to destroy the holy bodies of the 9 Daozu with one strike. As long as their bodies were destroyed, even if the 9 Daozu were Dao-fusing experts, only their immortal souls and Yuan Ling would be left behind. Not only the Daluotian army, but the entire 33 heavens, the human realm upon heavens, and the entire Panga world were shaking. Now that the great spirit vulture mountain was disintegrating, the 7 Buddhas used their natal secret arts to retrieve their parent bodies, and they merged back into their parent bodies. All the Buddhist power accumulated in the mountain by countless Buddhist monks during their countless years of cultivation was absorbed by the 7 Buddhas. Visible golden waves spread out from the giant liquid ball, and the Pangu world trembled along with the golden waves. The celestial emperors glanced at each other and subconsciously distanced themselves from each other. Heavenly Emperor Yuan Yen sighed softly. "Master, please don't blame us. Ever since we shed our immortal bodies and condensed our holy bodies, we are no longer members of the Tao sect. We are the gods of heaven and earth. What does that have to do with the Tao sect?" While sighing, Heavenly Emperor Yuan Yen raised his hand and waved. The unique pressure of a celestial emperor slowly spread out, and none of the holy beings in the great formation of chaos could resist it. They raised their weapons at the same time, and the great formation of chaos began to absorb the natural energies. Indistinctly, the silhouettes of all kinds of divine beasts shone from every corner of the formation. Zhu Qing, who was a stalk of tranquil spirit bamboo amidst the chaos, stared blankly at the silhouette in the purple mist and asked with a stutter, "Zizhuasheng, you," the Daluotian army trembled violently. The 9 immortal swords were wrapped in flames, and the pure immortal flame pierced through Zhu Qing's body with a terrifyingly high temperature. The poisonous flame and immortal flame fused into a strange green flame, burning Zhu Qing's body into nothingness in an instant. What a bunch of simple-minded fools. You formed the Holy Alliance to fight against us, so how can we not have any countermeasures? You need to know that before these fools fused with the Tao, Zizhuasheng and the others had already been possessed by our clones. The Daluotian army were all-powerful beings. They opened their eyes at the same time and looked in the direction of the trembling. The spirit vulture mountain was crumbling, and the sacred realm of the Buddhist League, which was formed by 7 mountains that stretched for billions of miles, was crumbling. Gradually, they separated and turned back into 7 enormous mountains. The 6 heavenly emperors were scared out of their wits. Among the 18 saints of the Holy Alliance who had been fighting against the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao, 9 of them had been possessed by Daozu's clones countless eons ago. So, how many more trump cards did Daozu have? The faces of the Daozu turned extremely unsightly, and so did the world destroyers. Whether it was destroying Pangu world or fighting for the innate spirits, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs were a huge obstacle. In particular, their auras were restless and fluctuating violently as if they had gone mad. Clearly, they had almost gone mad because of the disappearance of their spirits. Only heaven knew what they would do next. 7 terrifying majestic auras gradually rose, and the auras of the 7 Buddha ancestors became more and more powerful. In the end, they were already above everything, and even several times more powerful than the 9 Tao ancestors. The one who sneaked up on Great Horns was none other than Damon, the Lord of Strength, whom he had the best friendship with. Damon brazenly revealed his true form, grabbed Great Horns' shoulders with both hands and tore his body in two. Then, the red-browed Daozu flew over while laughing and slashed at Great Horns' immortal soul, nearly splitting it in two. Next, Tao Father Violetbrow's wretched white bracelet flew over, collecting Great Horn's immortal soul into it as well. His true soul had already become one with the Tao of the heavens, making it impossible for Tao Father Violetbrows to completely kill Zhu Qing. However, Now that his body had been destroyed and his soul imprisoned, Zhu Qing had lost all of his power. Aside from being imprisoned, he had no other way out. Dao Father Violet Brow let out a strange laugh. An evil light flashed through his eyes, and he barked at a Dao fusion expert of the Holy Alliance, Zilingzi, why haven't you woken up yet? All the people of the Holy Alliance fixed their eyes on the 9 Daozus, and the oppressive pressure emanating from them made the Daozu take a few steps back. The world destroyers stared at the 9 Daozus with wide eyes and cried out in unison, what about you? Is only one of the 9 of you who has a spirit? Princess Zhanglu, who was watching the battle, cried out in surprise, these 9 old Taoists are really powerful. I can't believe each of them has refined 9 divine clones. Strange, why do they only have 8 divine clones around them? These divine clones are not clones. They need to be nurtured in the Mind Sea. The 18 Dao fusing experts of the Holy Alliance took out their life treasures at the same time, surrounding the 9 Daozus in a circle. The 12 world destroyers approached the Daozus fiercely. Suddenly, the Daoyu Ocean situation became very strange. It was as if the Holy Alliance and the world destroyers had joined hands to attack the Daozus. 18 Dao fusing experts and 12 world destroyers, who had the same level of cultivation as the Dao fusing experts, were attacking the 9 Daozus. The Daozus' faces darkened. The Great Spirit Vulture Mountain was formed from the membranes of the 7 Buddha's mothers when they were born. Other Chaos God Fiends refined their mothers' bodies into protective armor or other intrinsic Dharma treasures, but the 7 Buddhas turned their mothers' bodies into the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain. For countless years, countless Buddhist disciples had been devoutly cultivating in the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain. The Buddhist power they emitted constantly tempered and scoured the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain. Every ordinary stone on the mountain had been tempered by the Buddhist power to the point that it was comparable to a Buddhist relic, and contained an enormous amount of Buddhist power. The expressions of the Dao Fathers changed dramatically, and they all chanted their Daoist names at the same time. Including Dao Father Longbrows, who had just recovered from his injuries, they spread out in the direction of the 9 palaces. Auspicious clouds of purple mist sprayed out from the top of their heads at the same time, and an immeasurable amount of golden light burst out from the purple mist. 9 lotus thrones emerged from the top of each Dao Father's head, and on each of the 9 lotus thrones sat a hazy figure. In the blink of an eye, 9 of the saints of the Holy Alliance were attacked by their companions. Under the sneak attack of the Daozu, all 9 of their bodies were destroyed, and their celestial souls were imprisoned. Chapter 1195. After letting out a few cold laughs, Dao Father Violet Brow turned to look at the army of the heavenly court. His cold, sinister gaze caused the 6 celestial emperors to feel a chill run down their spines. They instantly froze in place. Who would dare to move? Sighing slightly, Purple-browed Daozu said blandly, the 6 of you are still good disciples of our Dao League. Quickly set up the great heaven formation and subdue these evildoers, or you will all go to the God execution stage together. 9 Dao ancestors, 9 former mighty figures of the Holy Alliance, in addition to the 72 doppelgangers shrouded in hazy purple gas, each figure exuded an aura that had reached the peak of the Dao integration realm. The terrible power spread from the Daoyu Ocean, gradually spreading to the entire Pangu world. Gradually, the entire Pangu world was shrouded by this frighteningly strong power. As long-browed Daozu sneered, green-browed Daozu, who stood aside, waved his hand. Suddenly, an auspicious light burst out from the void, and from the smoke and clouds, an ancient-looking, huge scaffold surrounded by tens of thousands of dragons slowly flew out. There were 12 huge coiling dragon pillars erected on the execution platform. Each of the pillars was densely covered with countless chains and shackles, and they were emitting a heart-palpitating smell of blood. In the center of the scaffold was a guillotine, on which a huge guillotine also floated, emitting a cold light. On the edge of the guillotine, 9 purple immortal spell symbols were faintly visible. The 6 celestial emperors timidly stepped back, and the base of the great heaven formation was also slightly loosened. All the righteous gods followed the celestial emperors and stepped back in panic. The divine soldiers looked at their superiors at a loss, not knowing what to do. Ao Buzan looked at the 9 Daozu and cursed. Although he didn't know what the so-called innate spirit was, it must be something good since so many powerful beings were fighting for it. Besides, the Daozu did not hesitate to expose their biggest trump card to intimidate the others, which showed how precious the innate spirit was. Sadly, the strength of the Dao ancestors was too strong, and they truly could not be provoked. Who stole our connate spirits? Buddha guarding heart scolded, word by word. Long-browed Daozu's mocking laughter resounded through the world. The Buddhist League is indeed extraordinary. Billions of clones, it looks quite scary. Princess Xianglu frowned. She raised her hand, and the group carefully retreated outside the Daoyu Ocean. The power of the Daozu was beyond imagination. Princess Xianglu knew that she couldn't fight the Daozu now, so there was no better way but to retreat. Every Dao ancestor had 9 clones, and each clone's divine ability and magic power were equivalent to the main body. Any one of them had the power to suppress the 7 patriarchs of Buddhism. But today, when many almighties besieged them in an attempt to snatch their connate spirits, they decisively revealed their trump card and completely destroyed the Sanctuary Alliance with a thunderous momentum. That was Kill God stage. It was the only torture tool that could kill a sky god spirit. It did not matter if you were a mountain god, a land god, a sky king, or a god king. When it landed, you would be stripped from the protection of the sky god position. Your god body would collapse, and your soul would be destroyed. You would only be left with a weak soul that could be manipulated. If you were lucky, you could be sent into reincarnation. If you were unlucky, your soul would be destroyed, or your soul would be refined forever. That would be a fate worse than death. A deep Buddhist chant rang out, and 7 towering purple-gold Buddha statues appeared in the void. Kill the God stage appeared. It was like the blood of the 6 sky kings had been replaced with chicken blood. Their eyes were red as they screamed into the sky. The Chaos Sky Array was running. The big array was like a giant monster that was going to consume the 12 break world people. Kill the God stage. The stars in the sky were flashing fast. A giant suction force sucked the 12 break world people into the formation. A Buddhist mantra reverberated, and the 7 Buddha statues raised their hands at the same time and smashed their palms on their own heads. Billions of creatures fell into a state of paralysis the moment they sensed this power. Both their bodies and souls were shocked by this dreadful power. None of them moved, and their minds went blank. Everyone froze on the spot like stone statues. This was the true trump card of the Tao Fathers. This was the core formation of the Taoism, the 9 primes true lotus formation. Countless eons of hard work, countless attempts, and countless elites of the Taoist League had paid an unimaginable price to finally create this great formation, which gave the 9 Tao patriarchs the unbelievably mighty power. At least, with the break world people's current power, they could not defeat the 9 Daozu. Unless more than half of the humans and other creatures in Pan-Gu world were killed, the break world people would receive the support of the death power. Each of them would be 10 times more powerful than a Dao fusing level. If they worked together, they would not be able to defeat the 9 Daozu. Princess Xianglu angrily looked at Purple Brow's Daozu, but they were too strong. They could not fight them. Although Purple Brow's Daozu's words were full of disdain and even insulted them, now was not the time to care about that. The wind did not move, the water did not flow, the flowers did not smell good, and the birds did not sing. The vast Pan-Gu world had become a dead, haunted place. In the sky, only the Daozu's unbridled power was surging crazily. Gradually, a 9-colored lotus emerged from the Daoyu Ocean. It released an infinite amount of light that swept across the sky. Countless stars in the sky shone with dazzling lights at the same time. The dim starlight embellished this gigantic 9-colored lotus flower, looking like the faint fluorescent light under the sunlight, completely becoming the embellishment of the lotus flower. Tao Father Violet Brows had a look of mockery on his face as he stared down at the countless living beings of the All-Heaven. The threat did not come from De-Yi Master and Princess Xianglu. The most direct threat came from the rapidly shrinking ball of light above Lingjiu Mountain. The great spiritual vulture mountain was refined from the fetal membranes of their mothers. After being blessed by the immeasurable psyche force of the eminent monks of the Buddhist League, the power contained in the 7 fetuses of the 7 patriarchs of Buddhism was incalculable. Now that they had fused the fetuses with their bodies, no one knew how much benefit they would gain. Amidst the ruins of the palace of Tao Origin, the supremacy rose to his feet in a sorry state. He dragged Wu Qi, who was lying on the ground and dying, and dragged him towards Princess Zhanglu. The 9 Daozu glanced at De Yi Master coldly. Why would they care about a being that was lower than an ant? An incomparably pure white Buddhist light soared into the sky, and 3 fist-sized natal relics rushed out of each head of each Buddha statue. These golden relics were enveloped in Buddhist light and Buddhist flame, and as they fluttered in the wind, they transformed into Buddhist Dharma bodies that were exactly the same as their original bodies. The aura emanating from these Dharma bodies was exactly the same as their original bodies. It was the aura of the peak of Tao fusing, or even stronger. Putting everything else aside, the 9 Daozu had spent a great deal of effort to nurture their 9 clones and gradually refine them to the same level as their original bodies. One man turning into 9 gods. They had tried this technique back in the mortal world. In some of the lesser kiliacosms in the mortal world, they had also transformed into the ancestors of the Tao sect in that world and practiced various techniques. One man turning into 9 gods was born from the 3 pure ones, a famous technique in the mortal world where Wu Qi was born. Each of the golden bodies was millions of miles tall. They had millions of heads and millions of arms, and their bodies were densely covered with Buddha's eyes. When they opened and closed, Buddha's light shot out in all directions, causing the void to tremble. The 7 golden bodies showed off their power in the void for a while. Then, they quickly shrank. The heads, arms, and countless eyes all disappeared. In the end, they turned into 7 Buddha statues that were less than 30 feet tall. They wore countless jewels, and their bodies were surrounded by lotuses with a fragrant aroma. They only had 3 heads and 6 arms. Earth, water, fire, wind, and all kinds of lightning struck the 12 break world people. The chaos sky formation was a mess. The 12 break world people were trapped in a small space that was less than 100 miles wide. They were constantly being attacked. Boom! 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 The pure sky matrix could only deal with 2 peak Tao fusing elites. However, with the help of the 9 Daozu's fairy talismans, which were made by the Daozu's life blood, the pure sky matrix's power increased dozens of times. The 12 world break warriors were suppressed and could not move. Long Eyebrows Daozu, who was sitting next to Purple Eyebrows Daozu, coldly smiled and said, "If we can make you, we can destroy you. This is your only chance. Trap these foreign demons, and you can continue to be Sky Kings. If anything goes wrong." Purple Eyebrows Daozu looked at Princess Zhanglu and the others. He coldly said, "People who know what's good for them live longer. You know what's good for you. Good." There were 9 lotus seats in the middle of the lotus. The 9 Daozu's real bodies were sitting on the lotus seats. Each lotus platform had 9 holes for the growth of lotus seeds. A stream of purple gas spurted out from each of the holes and condensed into a total of 81 lotuses. The figures of the 9 grand cultivators of the Covenant Alliance blurred. They abandoned their physical bodies and turned into clones surrounded by purple gas, sitting cross-legged on the lotuses respectively. Auspicious lights flashed in the void. The 7 Buddhas brought all their clones to the 9 lotuses. There were 18 Tao Reunion Realm Masters in the Sanctuary Alliance. 9 of them were possessed by their clones. The other 9 had their bodies destroyed and their souls severely injured. At this moment, their souls were captured and suppressed by Purple Eyebrows Daozu with the strange bracelet. The Sanctuary Alliance, which was once awe-inspiring and had given the Taoist and Buddhist sects immense pressure, had actually been so easily defeated that it had fallen apart. Then, these clones of Buddha slapped their heads at the same time. Hundreds of thumb-sized relics came out of each of their heads. Each relic turned into a world venerable with a bronze body. Each world venerable spat out his own life relic again, which turned into thousands of Buddhas with golden light around them. Each Buddha spat out tens of thousands of relics, which turned into bodhisattvas with benevolent smiles on their faces. The break world people were shocked as they looked at the giant lotus flower. The magic powers of 90-path integration realm elites were combined. This power was like some of the spirit ancestors of the holy world. This power was too scary. It was so scary that the break world people, who were cruel by nature, felt their scalps go numb. They did not know what to do. Chapter 1196. The Chaos Sky Matrix surrounded the world breakers, making it difficult for them to escape. Princess Zhonglu and her people were just there to watch, and they did not want to do anything. The strange aura emanating from Princess Zhonglu and Qixia made the 9 Tao patriarchs frown, and they dared not to attack them for the time being. That was why the 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists of the Exalted Celestial were now facing off against each other. The 7 Buddhas were especially enraged, and their eyes were wide open. If not for the 9 Taoists of the Exalted Celestial displaying extraordinary power, they would have swarmed forward and devoured the Taoists of the Exalted Celestial alive. The 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists were 100 miles away from each other. Their eyes shone with a god light. Their eyes were invisible, but now they were compressed into tiny lights that could be seen by the naked eye. They clashed with each other, and there was a muffled sound of thunder. Occasionally, their gazes would collide fiercely, causing a few tiny sparks to fly and burning the surrounding space into tatters. The 9 Daozu had the advantage in numbers. At least, they had 2 more pairs of eyes. But the Buddhists' Dharma eye god power was better than the Taoists. So, when it came to seeing, the 2 sides were tied. The 16 powerful cultivators stared at each other for a full 2 hours. When the corners of their eyes were twitching and tears were about to flow out, they suddenly closed their eyes at the same time. They could not suppress the other side with their eyes, so they released their deified sense spirit to suppress the other side. On the Daozu's side, there was a green light with countless lotuses. It became a giant cloud that rushed forward. On the Buddha's side, there was an infinite amount of golden light with the smell of sandalwood. There were countless golden lamps, bells, and golden lotuses. It was like 2 armies were fighting. The cloud and the golden light from both sides killed each other. All kinds of lotuses, golden lamps, and bells fell like rain. The air was filled with a rich aroma. The 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists were shaking. The deified sense spirit of both sides were equally matched. The Daozu's faces looked terrible. The 7 Buddhas laughed coldly. The almighty experts of the Buddhist League paid the most attention to the cultivation of divine sense and willpower. The divine sense and willpower condensed by Buddhist cultivators of the same realm were usually about 30% stronger than that of immortals of the same realm. The spirit powers of the Daozu beings were indeed extremely powerful, but the spirit powers of the Buddhas were even greater, especially since each Buddha had created countless kingdoms of Buddha, with a tremendous amount of faith power provided by believers. In terms of spirit powers, not a single living being in Pan-Gu world could rival the 7 Buddhas. Seeing that both of them were equally matched, Purple Eyebrows Daozu sneered with a gloomy face, "Are you guys crazy? What happened to your innate spirits?" Heart-guarding Buddha stared straight at Daozu and said with a deep voice, "In this vast Pan-Gu world, except for you, no one can easily ambush us. You can become immortal just by fusing with an innate spirit. Why do you still want to plot against us?" Purple Eyebrows Daozu was speechless. The 9 Daozu beings quickly communicated with each other through their spirit powers, then Long Eyebrows Daozu snorted coldly and said, "This is not our doing." Heart-guarding Buddha stared at the 9 Buddhas with bloodshot eyes, gritted his teeth and said, "If you didn't show us your 9 clones, we would believe that you didn't do it. But now, it seems that who else can do it except for you? Who else can plot against us, except for those who are at the same level as us?" The Buddhas had a unanimous opinion. They were knocked down to the ground before they could even see the person who did it, which showed that the person who did it was at least at the same level as them, and the person must have an extremely powerful divine item to be able to do it. At the same time, the person must also know that they had innate spirits. Otherwise, why would he just knock them out and take away their innate spirits? Who else could meet these two conditions except for the 9 Daozu beings? The Daozu beings also had a unanimous opinion. This had nothing to do with them, and they would never take the blame. These 7 bald donkeys were so anxious that they even collapsed the spirit vulture mountain to refine their mother's membranes into their bodies to improve their powers. They were so angry that they were muddle-headed. At the same time, they were really anxious. It was not easy to take the blame. Maybe, both sides would be hurt. They could never accept this. Taking a deep breath, Purple Eyebrows Daozu said word by word seriously, "This has nothing to do with us. You 7, please go and catch the culprit. Don't come here. The World Breaker is trapped by the Chaos Sky Great Formation. Their powers have not recovered yet. It is a good time to suppress them. For all living beings in Pan-Gu world, we have to use our powers to kill the devil." In the Daozu being's opinion, it was enough that they explained to the Buddhas so seriously. They weren't the ones who did it, so how could they blame it on them? They were also curious about who stole the innate spirits of the Buddhas, but it had nothing to do with them. The Daozu beings were even gloating. The chance of the Buddhas becoming saints was gone. As long as the 9 of them suppressed the World Breaker and refined their innate spirits, they would be immortal. Then, they would live forever. How happy would that be? They really did not want to waste time with the 7 Buddhas, who were so anxious. However, the Buddhas did not think so. They were sure that this had something to do with the Daozu beings. Except for them, who else could easily ambush the 7 of them? To put it bluntly, even if this had nothing to do with the Daozu beings, they had to fight against the Daozu beings. If they could defeat the Daozu beings, suppress them, and take their innate spirits back, wouldn't they be able to make up for their losses? They were clear that the person who stole their innate spirits might have already left Pan-Gu world. If they were the ones who stole their innate spirits, they would leave the scene of the crime as soon as possible and find a safe place to devour their innate spirits. The chaotic world was boundless. Where could they find the culprit? Therefore, even if this had nothing to do with the Daozu beings, they had to put the blame on the Daozu beings. Whether they did it or not, the Buddhas believed that they did it. Since they were the culprits, then it was only right and proper to defeat them and take back their innate spirits. Even if this would cause an unprecedented war, so what? Without their innate spirits, they would lose the chance to become saints. This was even worse than killing the Daozu beings. They had to defeat the Daozu beings, no matter what. All Buddhas, listen up. Show yourselves. The guarding heart Buddha ignored the explanation of the Purple Eyebrows and Daozu, and directly gave the order. His voice spread across the entire Pan-Gu world. Chants of Buddha came from all directions, and countless spots of Buddha light suddenly shone in every corner of the Pan-Gu world. Under the order of Buddha guarding heart, countless ascetic monks slowly walked out from those remote, uninhabited planets, those barren mountains and rivers, those caves that were filled with poisonous bugs, those caves in deserts, and the most dangerous places in Pan-Gu world, where even ordinary immortals could barely survive, under the order of Buddha guarding heart. These ascetic monks were all scrawny, and some even looked like skeletons. Some of them were even missing limbs, which were the result of having their limbs devoured by poisonous bugs or fierce beasts. But, every single one of these ascetic monks was releasing a frightening pressure of Buddha power. Their bodies were wrapped in a faint golden Buddha light, and they darted towards the Daoyuotian beings in long streaks of light. Even the weakest ascetic monks were at the bodhisattva level of cultivation. Among them, about 90% of the ascetic monks' physical bodies were on the verge of collapse. However, the Buddhist ascetic monks paid the least attention to their physical bodies. Many ascetic monks simply abandoned their physical bodies in the process of flying over and directly condensed their transcendence golden bodies with Buddhist power. But, the ascetic monks hiding in Pan-Gu world were nothing. Most of the Buddhist forces came from the mortal worlds. There were hundreds of millions of mortal worlds, and each of them had a different number of planets, with countless ordinary people living on them. After countless years of operation, the Buddhist orthodoxy had been greatly developed in the mortal world. In countless temples in the mortal worlds, the statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which were enshrined in shrines, emitted a dazzling golden light at the same time, which gathered high into the sky. Countless ordinary people were summoned by the golden light. They knelt on the ground and began chanting Buddhist scriptures, chanting the true names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas they worshipped. A tremendous power of faith rose into the sky and poured into those statues of Buddhas. Many virtuous monks of the Buddhist League, who had been worshipped by countless believers for countless years, walked out of their respective caves. They cast secret magics and injected the power of faith into their spirit relics. Suddenly, their cultivation bases were astonishingly improved. The Buddhist cultivators of the Arhat realm were upgraded to the Bodhisattva realm, the virtuous monks of the Bodhisattva realm were upgraded to the Buddha realm, and the virtuous monks of the Buddha realm had broken through to the realm of the World Lord. What was even more shocking was that the 36 Buddhas sent by the Buddhist League to guard the mortal worlds, known as the 36 Buddhas of the mortal world, had broken through to the realm of the World Lord in one fell swoop, reaching the level of the Tao-fusing realm. Although their Yuanling hadn't had the time to merge with the heavenly Tao, their magical powers were enough to compete with the mighty figures of the Tao-fusing realm. Under the leadership of these 36 Buddhas, all the disciples of the Buddhist League in the mortal worlds, including those low-level disciples who had just condensed their Arhat true bodies with the help of the tremendous power of faith, rushed out of the mortal worlds in auspicious lights. In the vast mortal worlds, countless minor kiliacosms, and countless stars, all kinds of Buddhist phenomena appeared at the same time. The 8 parts of the heavenly dragons were faintly discernible, and countless Buddhist saints sprayed out golden auspicious clouds and sprinkled countless golden flowers. Whether they were Buddhist believers or not, the common people of the mortal worlds all knelt on the ground and worshipped devoutly in the face of such a wonderful scene. They chanted various Buddhist scriptures and mantras, and surging power of faith was constantly injected into the bodies of the Buddhas. From the bodies of the Buddhist Vedanta of the mortal worlds, countless golden lights rose into the sky and rushed to be injected into the bodies of the 7 Buddhas before they arrived. The bodies of the 7 Buddhas became more and more solid and powerful, and the aura they emitted had faintly suppressed the 9 Daozu in front of them. But this was not the end. The Buddhist cultivators of the mortal worlds moved, and the 6 nether emperors of the netherworld, together with the dozens of nether Buddhas Chi-Chi who were guarding the netherworld, flew up into the sky, leading countless nether soldiers who were roaring and dancing wildly. With a loud bang, the underworld sea of blood covered the entire Daoyu Ocean, and the 6 paths of reincarnation heavenly will appeared directly in the Daoyu Ocean. The 6-colored lights swept across the sky, and the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in the great formation of chaos were suddenly reduced by 10%. They were all forcibly wiped out by the 6 paths of reincarnation, including Yuanling. Even though they were the divine bodies of the heavenly path, they were still completely wiped out. The Buddhist League unscrupulously showed their muscles, and their strength was actually so tyrannical. Chapter 1197. More and more Daoyu Ocean Buddhists arrived from all over Pan-Gu world. The weaker ones flew up from the temples and forests in Pan-Gu world, while the stronger ones flew over from stars in outer space. The stronger ones flew out from the cores of stars and black holes in Pan-Gu world. Some Buddha cultivators, who were especially powerful, had even returned to Pan-Gu world from the chaos. With their powers, they tore open the space and returned to Pan-Gu world, then cast their escaping magics and flew back to Pan-Gu world. Some Buddhists were mounted on odd-looking chaos creatures. Obviously, they were the mounts they subdued in the chaos. Some chaos creatures had even reached the level of Tao breaking. Added with the powers of those Buddhists, their powers were even more amazing. The mighty Buddhist cultivators kept rushing into the celestial zenith heaven, and they stood according to their strength and status according to the 100 sects of Buddhism. The people of Tao League in Daoyuo heaven let out cries of surprise from time to time. Some of these monks who had come out of seclusion in various unimaginable places were said to have fallen a long time ago. But now, they were all here, and their cultivations were especially strong, much stronger than when they were at their peak. Among them were more than 300 Buddhist lords from the past generations of Buddhist lords. It was said that all of them had fallen in the apocalypse, and their souls had perished long ago. They didn't even have the chance to be reincarnated. But now, over 300 former Buddhists had arrived. Their bodies were glowing with a warm light, and they sat on lotus thrones with benevolent smiles on their faces. In the eyes of those Buddhists, those smiles seemed to be mocking them. "My 7 friends," sighed purple-browed Daozu. "I'm afraid you've been planning for a long time. Now, you're going to turn against us, aren't you?" Buddha Protector's crimson eyes stared fixedly at Tao Father violet brows. He laughed coldly, "Same to you. I'm just being prepared." They stared at each other like 2 fighting cocks. After a long while, Daozu nodded slowly and said, "If we really turn against each other and start a fight, I'm afraid we'll only benefit the others." Guarding heart, did he really have to take that step? "You and I have been scheming against each other for countless years, but we both care about our own feathers and have never really fought each other. Do you really want to fight to the death in the end?" Buddha Guardian Heart gritted his teeth, "Unless you hand over our Khanate spirit, we won't rest until one of us is dead." Meanwhile, the Buddhas of the underworld had led the army of Yin soldiers into the Daluotian territory, and with their supreme power, they had moved the heavenly wheel of 6 paths of reincarnation into the Daluotian territory. 6 beams of black and white light spun slowly, and all the heavenly soldiers of the celestial court who were swept by them fell. Even though they had the protection of the divine seed of the heavenly law, they were still forcibly stripped from the divine seed of the heavenly law. Their divine bodies were cleanly cut by the wheel of reincarnation, and Yuan Ling was forcibly thrown into the cycle of reincarnation. The Daozu raised their heads and looked at the enormous wheel of 6 paths of reincarnation that encompassed the entire Daluotian territory. Logically speaking, the 6 paths of reincarnation was just a part of the heavenly Tao, and it was impossible for it to have such a strong power to obliterate the divine seed of the heavenly law. However, within the 6 paths of reincarnation treasure wheel before him, there were 7 massive golden Buddhist treasure wheels hidden within. Every gate of reincarnation had a treasure wheel presiding over it, and at the hub of the 6 paths of reincarnation, there was a Buddhist treasure wheel with 42 layers of complicated structures. The heaven-developing saint wheel. Purple Brows Daozu said ferociously, "This is the strongest ancient saint item you have obtained when we entered the ancient saint palace together. You actually used it to suppress the 6 paths of reincarnation. So, it seems like you have planned this long ago." Buddha Guardian Heart slowly raised his arms, and all 6 of them formed into the powerful seal of Lion Demon Subduing. He shouted in a deep voice, "Yes, we have planned this long ago. You, the Tao League's apotheosis, control the divine title of the heavenly law, so how can we, the Buddhist League, not prepare for this? The combination of the heaven-developing saint wheel and the 6 paths of reincarnation is just right to restrain the divine title conferred by your apotheosis of the gods." The great heaven formation was in a mess. The 6 paths of reincarnation kept shooting out black and white lights that swept across the formation, shattering the divine bodies of large groups of divine soldiers and heavenly generals and forcibly sending them into the wheel of reincarnation. In just a few words, hundreds of millions of divine soldiers on the periphery had been wiped out. Purple Brows Daozu sneered, nodded, and said, "Excellent, excellent. But you, the Buddhist League, have been plotting to deal with us, so how can we not be on guard?" The 9-colored lotuses rotated slowly, and streams of purple and green immortal energy rose, condensing into a 100-mile-long Tao talisman above the heads of the 9 Daozu. The huge Tao talisman contained a terrible power. As Purple Brows Daozu gave a long roar, the 9 Daozu waved their hands at the same time. The Tao talisman flew straight into the sky and smashed fiercely on the edge of the Daluotian territory. Countless Buddhist saints were responding to the call of the Buddhas and rushing to the Daluotian territory. But as soon as the Tao talisman was launched, the Daluotian territory was suddenly filled with a terrible dimensional tide. The void shattered like countless blades, and at least 1 million Buddhist saints who had been ordered to come were sucked into the shattered space, falling to the ground without leaving any bones behind. The 7 Buddhas were both angry and anxious. They roared furiously and unleashed beams of Buddhist light to guide their disciples who were sucked into the void, but it was of no use. Above the celestial of great overarching heaven, an area of the void collapsed with a loud rumble, and a clear light, accompanied by a dense natural energy, poured down. Everyone was stunned, including Wu Qi, who had just sneaked back to the Daluotian territory. Since the ancient times, there were only 33 heavens in Pan-Gu world, but what were those in the sky above the Daluotian territory? Those were 3 vast heavenly realms, each of which was as large as the total area of the 33 heavens. The third heaven was filled with mountains and rivers, and there were Taoist temples and pavilions everywhere. At this moment, countless Taoists in purple Taoist robes floated up from the Taoist temples and pavilions on auspicious clouds. Before long, they formed a cloud platform formation of 10,000 people and flew down from the heaven of exalted. Phoenixes hovered in the sky, cranes fluttered in the sky, and some Taoists with powerful cultivations mounted on all kinds of mounts flew down. These Taoists slowly landed around the 9-colored lotus flower, cupping their fists and bowing to the Tao ancestor respectfully. None of the Taoists said a word, and they did not need to say a word. At this moment, they appeared here in such a way. Clearly, they were the forces that Tao League had secretly planted to warn Buddhist League. The blood-red light in the eyes of the 7 Buddhas dimmed slightly. The Daluotian territory actually had 3 heavens, and they had never known this secret for so many years. Even some of the Taoists they had planted in Tao League were masters of Tao League, but they still did not know that there were 3 heavens above the Daluotian territory. Moreover, who were the Taoists who came out of the 3 heavens? Among them, there were many faces that the Buddhas had a deep impression of. Among the previous celestial emperors, at least 30% of them were among these Taoists. It was said that there were more than 10,000 Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals of Tao League who had died in the apocalypse of heaven and earth. Tao Father Violet Brow said calmly, "They are the true elites of our Taoist path." The Grand Firmament Heaven also has the Hongjun Heaven. Aside from the 9 of us, no other disciple of the Taoist path is permitted to take a single step out of the Hongjun Heaven. The entrance is personally guarded by the 9 of us. Aside from the disciples of the Taoist path who are sent into the Hongjun Heaven, no one else knows of the existence of the 3rd heaven. Zimei Daozu looked at Buddha guarding heart coldly and said, "If you Buddhist League want to turn against Tao League with sophistry, why don't you try?" 9 beams of spiritual light flew up from the top of the heads of the Daozu. Half of the spiritual light was hidden in their bodies, and the other half was flying in the wind above their heads. Zimei Daozu coldly laughed and said, "Our pre-heaven spirits are here. Whoever has the power to take them can take them." Inside the chaos sky formation, there was a deep roar. The 12 break world people saw there were 9 pre-heaven spirits there, and they were going crazy. Everyone was risking their lives to get out. They just wanted to take one of the pre-heaven spirits. From now on, they had nothing to fear. Guard Heart Buddha turned his head and looked at the other 6 Buddhas. The eyes of the 6 Buddhas looked very determined. Just like they had calculated, the person who had taken their pre-heaven spirits had already escaped into chaos. Even if Daozu had nothing to do with taking their pre-heaven spirits, for the sake of being holy, for the sake of being unchangeable, they had to take the pre-heaven spirits of the 9 Daozu. There was no room for negotiation. They had to fight to the death. For the sake of true immortality, for the sake of being unchangeable, for the sake of being holy, even if they had to sacrifice all of their disciples, so what? They raised their heads and looked at the 6 paths of reincarnation floating above their heads. The 7 Buddhas flew up and sat on the 6 paths and the center of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The sky developing holy will released beams of Buddha light that covered the Buddhas. The 7 Buddhas chanted scriptures together. Suddenly, golden flowers fell from the sky, and a dense aroma swept across the entire Pan-Gu world. The powerful Buddhas who had arrived at the Daluotian world all flew into the 6 paths of reincarnation. The powerful Buddhas who were rushing to the Daluotian world were also swept up by a beam of Buddha light. No matter where they were in Pan-Gu world, they all appeared in the 6 paths of reincarnation. Billions of lotuses bloomed in the 6 paths of reincarnation. Inside each lotus was a Buddhist kingdom, and in each kingdom, there were countless Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Vajras, and other Buddhas sitting cross-legged and chanting Buddhist scriptures. Countless Buddhas in Pan-Gu world felt the call. They all knelt on the ground and chanted the scriptures, providing a great amount of faith power. The 9 Tao ancestors sneered as well. Although they were puzzled by the fact that a mighty being had stolen the primordial spirit of the Buddha ancestors, it was obvious that the 7 Buddha ancestors were going to steal their fortunes. How could they tolerate such a thing? They shared the same thoughts as the Buddhas. For the fortune of the Tao, so what if they had to sacrifice all the elites of Tao? Tao was not the Tao of those disciples. It was the Tao of the 9 Daozu world. As long as the Daozu world existed, Tao would exist. If the Daozu world fell, what was the point of the Tao's existence? Along with a clear roar, the 9 colored lotuses flashed rapidly. Countless Tao disciples threw themselves into the lotuses and stood in their respective positions. The Buddhas took out the powerful sacred treasures they had obtained from the 7 holy palaces, the heaven-evolving sacred wheel. The Daozu world did not want to be outdone. They also took out a purple pagoda with 36 floors. The 33 heavens where the celestial court was located, including the Daoyuotian world and the 3rd heavens that had just appeared, collapsed at the same time. The 36th heavens turned into 36 enormous streams of spirit energy and rushed into the pagoda. Purple Eyebrows Daozu said loudly, "Now that things have come to this, there is no need to talk nonsense. You and I will kill each other with one strike." Chapter 1198. Wahuang clan coughed violently. 90,000 concubines. This was the doing of the emperors and ministers of the 6 states. Even the 12 realm breakers trapped in the great formation of Great Heaven were stunned. They threw their heads back and sighed helplessly, as if they were going to be suppressed again. Pangu's face turned purple, and then red. Without saying a word, he pulled out a large axe and swung it down toward Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi's eyes went wide. No wonder Pangu had the confidence to let the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs do whatever they wanted in the world he had created. Did he have such a trump card? Since he was able to give away 3 innate spirits at will, Pangu must not be short of them, and Wahuang clan must have benefited from them as well. Pangu snorted. Holding the axe tightly, he turned into a shadow and disappeared into Wahuang clan's shadow. It's an emergency, but it's also a great opportunity. Maybe we can solve all the problems once and for all, Pangu murmured in a low, muffled voice. 33 heavens were collapsing, and the 3 heavens above the Daoyuotian realm were collapsing rapidly. The collapse of the heavens not only shook the natural energy, but also tore the surrounding void apart. Raging chaotic energy rushed out of the huge cracks, turning into gales, hailstones, thunderbolts, meteorites, and other things that kept raining down on Pangu continent in a messy manner. Similarly, if the 9 Daozu were defeated, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs would definitely destroy their immortal bodies and suppress their Yuanling. Once they plundered the innate spirits of the 9 Daozu and became immortal, the 9 Daozu would face a catastrophe. Princess Zhanglu, Yi Xia, and the others went into the great formation of heaven stealing without saying a word. A little carelessness would cause the situation to get out of hand. With the collapse of the void, apart from Pangu continent, the entire void of Pangu world was riddled with cracks. No one dared to waste time. The most important thing now was to join the formation and protect Pangu continent. After Pangu formed his true form, the laws of heavenly Tao of Pangu world were greatly improved and replenished. Wu Qi's heaven-pilfering formation did not have enough control over the laws of heavenly Tao of the newborn Pangu world, and could barely mobilize a small part of its power. In the face of this apocalyptic natural disaster, the formation could not even protect itself, let alone Nia Yaonu and the others. One strike could decide life and death. After that, no matter who lost, he or she would have no chance to turn the situation around. Countless immortals in the celestial court had fallen. When the heavenly realms collapsed, a small half of them were killed. When the heavenly realms turned into an enormous amount of natural energy and poured into the 36-layered pagoda, another small half of them had their bodies and souls crushed. Finally, the violent energy that sprayed out from the cracks in the void killed another small half of them. More than 90% of the immortals who stayed in the celestial court had fallen. Wu Qi grabbed the 3 innate spirits and shoved them into his mouth, then laughed dryly and said, 3 innate spirits are indeed a great gift for me and 2 wives. He did not know what the pagoda produced by the 9 Daozu was, but it was obviously a powerful sacred artifact left behind by the sacred realm. The Daozu had divided the power of the pagoda into 36 heavenly realms, which served as the base of the celestial court and the secret realm where Dao League nurtured their weapons. Gradually, these 36 heavenly realms had infected the void of Pangu world, fusing with the void, and were constantly extracting the energy from the void to replenish themselves. Wu Qi let out a strange laugh, then transformed into 10,000 streams of flame and soared into the sky. With a few teleportations, he had returned to where the Daoyu Ocean warriors were. Suddenly, Wu Qi's body twitched, as his true form had returned and merged with his clone. Slowly, he rose to his feet and looked at the enormous 9-colored lotus and 7 golden wheels above his head. Without saying a word, he waved his sleeve and brought all his people away. Pangu clenched his teeth and cried out in a low voice, 90,000 little concubines, do you think these innate spirits are some dirt that you can pick up from the ground? Back then, I risked my life to solve a case, and only managed to obtain 13 of them from the chaos. Giving you 3 of them is already a great favor. With a single strike, life and death were decided. Only a sphere of golden light was shining brightly in the middle of the 3 pure heavens. The sky pilfering formation was emitting a dazzling golden light that enveloped the entire area. Meng Xiaobai, Luo Kadi, Nia Yaonu, and all the people on Wu Qi's side were gathered in the golden light, looking at the void that had almost turned into a pot of boiling porridge in horror. In the core of the formation, 6 saint emperors were struggling to muster the divine power of the great Tao to maintain the operation of the formation. But, as the surrounding energy waves crashed against it, the golden light of the formation was faintly shaking, and it seemed to be in a precarious situation. Suddenly, a bright light flickered around Wu Qi, as Pangu and Huang clan teleported to his side at the same time. If the 7 Buddhas were defeated, the Buddhist League would be defeated as well. The 9 Daozu would not give the 7 Buddhas any chance to turn the situation around. They would directly suppress Yuan Ling of the 7 Buddhas, and when they fully understood the secret of the innate spirits and became immortal saints, when their overall strength surpassed the level of the great Tao of Pangu world, they would definitely separate the spirit of the 7 Buddhas from the great Tao of Pangu world and destroy them completely. The Great Heaven Formation, which gathered all the divine soldiers and commanders of the celestial court, except for the true gods of 5 elements, abruptly appeared at the center of the collision. All of a sudden, a sonorous roar and a chant of Buddha's name shook the surrounding void and shattered it. The 9-colored lotus and the 7 golden wheels collided head-on with each other, stirring up a billowing chaotic aura. Without any fancy moves or divine abilities, all the elites of the Buddhist League and the Taoist League had gathered all their forces and turned them into 2 destructive torrents of energy, thrusting towards each other. But, the phrase, one strike to decide life and death, was definitely the most sincere one that Zimei Daozu had ever said in his life. The 9-colored lotus and the 7 golden wheels emitted a strong light that illuminated the whole world at the same time. All the elites of the Buddhist League and the Taoist League had gathered in them, and both sides had used their final strength to prepare for a life-and-death battle. The natural energy of Pangu world was constantly pouring into the Daoyu Ocean, which had turned the vast Daoyu Ocean into a black hole, crazily devouring everything around it. When the 2 sides were still hundreds of thousands of miles away from each other, Wu Qi leaped into the sky above the Great Heaven Formation and waved his hands. 10 torrents of runes shot out of his fingers like water waves, which transformed into a colorful glow and wrapped the formation tightly. Seeing that the formation was about to collapse, Wu Qi flew to the edge of the formation with the others. He opened his mouth and spat out 36 balls of golden light, which transformed into runes and stabilized the surrounding natural energies. Then, he pushed the formation towards Pangu continent. Huang clan looked at the countless cracks in the void above her with a gloomy face. Her eyes were watery, as if tears were about to drip down her cheeks. She sighed in a low voice and said, Nuwa has indeed mended the sky. But in the past, no matter how powerful the apocalypse of heaven and earth was, it only left 3 to 5 marks. Now, it's far more than 3 to 500 billion. Those old farts are truly abominable. The 2 torrents of energy slammed hard into the Great Heaven Formation, and a dazzling light enveloped the entire Pangu world. It was not one strike to decide life and death, but one strike to decide life and death. In the void, the elites of the Buddhist League and the Taoist League were facing each other. Millions of miles away, the Great Heaven Formation had been compressed into a ball with a diameter of 100,000 miles under the effect of the talismans, wrapping the 12 world breakers and attacking them fiercely. Huang Clan sighed with a sad face. The myriad spirit cauldron shot out from the top of her head, and a fist-sized yellow lump of soil shot out of it. She smiled bitterly and said, "Eldest brother, please protect Nuwa. The void is broken, and if it is not mended as soon as possible, even if Pangu continent is fine, the people in the outer heavenly realms will be killed or wounded. I'm afraid that if too many living beings are killed or wounded, the overall strength of those world breakers will rise." Pangu's face was gloomy and unsightly. He narrowed his eyes and said word by word, 33 heavens and the Great Vulture Mountain are the manifestations of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. They have nothing to do with this world. I didn't expect the 33 heavens to be such a scourge. The 6 celestial emperors roared in despair at the same time. Countless divine soldiers and heavenly generals stared blankly at the torrents of destruction coming at them from both sides, then closed their eyes in despair. Pangu grumbled angrily to Empress Hua, why did he have to save his strength to destroy the lairs of those world breakers? I'm going to kill him today. If it were not for those world breakers, why would I ask him to deal with the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs? It was like 36 clusters of cancer cells growing in the body of a healthy man. Now, the Daozu had activated the pagoda. The 36 heavens had collapsed, bringing the original power of Pangu world they had extracted over the years back into the pagoda. Although the pagoda had become infinitely powerful, the entire void of Pangu world was on the verge of collapse. He coughed out 9 mouthfuls of blood essence in a row. Mustering all his strength, he barely managed to shift the huge grand formation of Great Heaven a little. Looking up at the chaotic void full of cracks, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, Empress Hua, here comes your specialty. My people will help you protect Pangu continent, and you need to find a way to mend this hole. Damn it, aren't the 33 heavens originally from Pangu world? Purple-browed Daozu's words were very straightforward. He had never spoken so straightforwardly since he was born in the chaos. Not to mention that he was talking to the 7 Buddhist patriarchs of the Buddhist League. He had never said a word of sincerity to these 7 old foes. Wu Qi could see that the 33 heavens were indeed a great disaster. Pangu smiled and was about to say something, but he heard Wu Qi laugh shamelessly and say, but poor thing, in addition to my 2 wives, I have 90,000 concubines. The Buddhist League collected the power of faith from ordinary people and turned it into their own power, while the Tao League was even more outrageous. They directly extracted the original power of Pangu world and turned it into their own. Now, it seemed that both the Buddhist League and the Tao League were parasites of Pangu world. The only difference was that their hosts were different. Wu Qi gave Pangu a sideways glance and said, this is your territory, and you didn't even notice what they did. The 12 world breakers had been trapped by the great array of Great Chaos Heaven. With their current strength, they could not pose any threat to the Buddhist patriarchs or Daozu. As long as these world breakers were suppressed at the same time, the winner of the battle between the Buddhist League and the Tao League would have nothing to worry about. Pangu's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, I have been asleep for so many years, and it has only been 100 years since I woke up. I have been focusing on refining my true spirit. How could I have the time to fight with them? Glaring at Wu Qi, Pangu took out 3 innate spirits from his sleeve, each shrouded in purple mist. He snorted coldly and said, help me stabilize the void and clean this world, and I will give you 3 innate spirits. Chapter 1199. Stupid. Indescribably stupid. Wu Qi didn't know why he intervened in this matter. He couldn't figure out why he would listen to Pangu and the Huang clan and participate in this matter. He also didn't know why he chose to participate in this matter in such a stupid way. An indescribable darkness rushed toward him. It was the darkness that erupted when 2 destructive energies collided with each other, a darkness filled with the aura of death. All the elites of Buddhist League and Taoist League used all their strength, essence, and everything they had to fight head-on. What they brought was the darkness that could destroy everything. Darkness enveloped his entire body. Wu Qi only felt that his vitality was instantly erased. His body, soul, Yuan Ling, and all the marks of existence seemed to be completely erased at this moment. An unprecedented despair reverberated in his heart. He let out a soundless roar. He seemed to see the scene of his soul dispersing and completely vanishing. He was less than 10,000 miles away from the center of the collision between Buddhist League and Taoist League. He grabbed the grand array of chaos and sent it to the center of the collision, but the result was that he also crashed into the center of the collision. There was no time for him to escape. The surrounding void collapsed, the great Tao of heaven collapsed, and all the objective laws of Pangu world were swept away. Only absolute nothingness and annihilation ruled the void for millions of miles in radius. In this place, Wu Qi had no chance to escape. He couldn't fly, teleport, or tear the void to escape. The void no longer existed. Space was now just a concept. Time was shattered, and all physical and spiritual existences were torn apart. The darkness that could destroy everything ruled the void, ruled everything, and ruled Wu Qi's entire body. The grand array of chaos heaven collapsed with a loud bang. This array was originally designed to deal with 2 or so existences at the peak of the Tao integration realm. Even with the enhancement of the Tao Ancestors' Spirit Talisman, it could only trap 10 mighty figures at the peak of the Tao integration realm at most. But now, all the elites of Buddhist League and Taoist League had gathered together to launch an all-out attack. The grand array of chaos collapsed immediately. The heaven-developing sacred will combined with the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation sliced the grand array of chaos layer by layer like a sharp knife peeling an apple. All the righteous gods below the 6 heavenly emperors were turned into nothingness. Their divine bodies collapsed, their divine souls melted, and Yuan Ling was also forcefully erased by the heaven-evolving sacred wheel. The stars in the sky shattered one after another, and many of the celestial lords of the celestial court were killed by the evolving sacred wheel. The terrifying destructive power followed the connection between the celestial lords and their natal stars, and directly attacked these stars that had existed since the primordial era. Stars shattered like a heavy rain. The explosion of ancient stars stirred the space of Pan-Gu world even more. Huang clan had been concentrating on controlling the power of the 10,000 spirit cauldron to suppress the space. Hearing this, her face turned pale, and blood spurted out from her eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. Huang clan let out a bitter laugh as she cut open her wrist and poured a large amount of lifeblood essence into the myriad spirit cauldron. She let out a long sigh and said, "I really have to risk my life this time, or this world will be completely destroyed." Below the 6 divine emperors, all celestial lords and celestial lords of the celestial court were killed. The 12 world breakers, who were trapped in the great formation and couldn't move, roared happily towards the sky, as if they had just eaten a great nourishing pill. So many divine beings were destroyed, and the destructive power brought by the destruction boosted the powers of the 12 world breakers by 100 times. In both fear and joy, they looked at the darkness, which was coming at their faces. Simultaneously, they cut off their left arms. Their broken arms transformed into a cloud of blood mist, which was wrapped up by the devil power. Then, they transformed into blood-red beams of light and fled to a long distance away. This was the life-saving magic of the world breakers, a magic that didn't belong to the great Tao of nature of Pan-Gu world. Instead, it was inherited from some ancient, eternal law, of the holy world. This magic didn't belong to the great Tao of Pan-Gu world. Therefore, the disintegrating space, time, and all other great Tao of nature couldn't affect this magic. A gloomy, cold laugh came from afar. Shuyang, who had all his energy, essence, and soul sucked dry by Wu Qi and Gridrakuta mountain a moment ago, had suddenly gained a great power. Swallow Yang teleported next to a group of break world people. He looked at the deep darkness that covered space and said, "I can feel the presence of the 9 spirits. I have to get them." Swallow Yang's eyes lit up. He looked at Swallow Yang and said, I can feel the presence of 9 spirits. The world breakers glanced at each other with gloomy faces. There were only 9 spirits, but they had 13 people who were immortal and equally powerful. Only 9 lucky ones could get the spirits. 4 of them had no chance at all. They carefully distanced themselves from each other. In an instant, they had changed from companions who had worked together to competitors. A loud and deep laughter came from above their heads. A giant axe, glowing with a pale yellow light, was swinging down. Pan Gu turned into a 300-meter-tall giant. He swung his axe at the world breakers. Pan Gu laughed and said, "Are you still thinking about how to steal things? Let's see if you can get rid of me first." The big axe broke space. A giant vortex sucked up the 13 world breakers. Pan Gu's eyes flashed. With an indescribable emotion, he looked around at Pan Gu's world, which was on the verge of collapsing. He exhaled deeply and stepped into the vortex. The world of chaos was very far away from Pan Gu's world. Pan Gu swung his big axe as he walked out. The 13 world breakers were far away from each other. They all stared at Pan Gu. Just now, the axe cleaved open the void and forcefully teleported them here. This kind of divine ability and magic power made them shocked. This was a sufficiently strong enemy. Pan Gu laughed. He squinted and nodded. 9 spirits, but there are 13 of you. If 4 of them are suppressed by me, then you can split the innate spirit equally. Hee, which 4 unlucky guys will be suppressed by me? The 13 break world people looked at each other. 90% of their attention was on their companions. Pangu's threat was not as great as their companions. Pangu's threat was not as great as their companions. Pangu's words shattered the break world people's last hope of fighting. Spirit Puppet took a deep breath. He suddenly turned into countless silver liquid beads and flew around. He gave up on fighting Pan Gu and chose to run. When he returned to Pan Gu's world, while the Buddhists and Taoists were both injured, he was 100% sure he could take a spirit from Daozu. All he needed was an innate spirit. He didn't have any other extravagant requests. A born spirit was immortal and could not be destroyed. Even if End created the 13 break world people, he would not be able to control them. Every break world being thought that way. They were happy to bring disaster to other creatures, but they did not want to be destroyed for all eternity. They also wanted to live for a long time. Pan Gu laughed scornfully. He raised his head and gave a resonant roar. 36 beams of light flew out of his mouth and transformed into 36 10,000 miles wide spell symbols, sealing the surrounding space. All of a sudden, the chaotic chi condensed into a sphere that was hundreds of thousands of kilometers thick, enclosing the entire space. The soul puppet, which had transformed into hundreds of millions of clones and was fleeing at top speed, bumped into the glowing shield. Along with a thunderous roar, it was forcibly struck back by countless bolts of lightning. Pan Gu smiled proudly and said, "Look carefully. These 36 spell symbols are the defensive formation outside the Devil Palace, where your immortal soul seals reside. I studied the immeasurable power in my dream. With the natural fortune of the humankind, which is inherited from my bloodline, I slept for countless years to understand the essence of these 36 eternal law holy characters. You want to leave? How can it be so easy?" Showing 4 fingers, Pan Gu said proudly, "For, with my power, I can only suppress 4 of you. I can suppress 4 of you, but I don't care about the rest." The world breakers all retreated. None of them wanted to be suppressed by Pan Gu. Pan Gu's eyes flashed with a smile. He flipped his hand and swung his axe toward Sha Yang, who was standing behind him. Shi Yang hesitated briefly, then abruptly leaped up and darted to Qian Shou. Qian Shou didn't manage to react timely. He only managed to tilt his head slightly, but Pan Gu swiftly chopped off Qian Shou's newly regenerated left arm. "Sha Yang, you bitch!" Thousand Heads was furious. Countless strands of hair flew out from behind his head. They pulled his body toward Sha Tu, who was much slower than him. Sha Tu, who was wearing heavy armor and holding a big sword, was trying his best to stay away from Pan-gu. He was so angry that he roared. Pan-gu's axe swung toward Sha Tuesday. The 13 world breakers were being chased by Pan-gu. No one thought about working together to take down Pan-gu. Pan-gu kept roaring and screaming as he chased after the world breakers. He was wearing out their power bit by bit. In Pan-gu's world, the boundless darkness swallowed Wu-Chi. Suddenly, his body shook. A human-shaped spirit light appeared out of nowhere. The darkness that could devour everything could not destroy his body and soul. He just created a body out of thin air. He regained his life force and started to absorb the power of the darkness that could destroy everything. The destructive flood turned into a powerful holy power that surged through his body. Wu-Chi quietly read the holy words he had learned in the 7 Holy Palace. His body flashed with all kinds of spell symbols. A pitch-black whirlpool appeared on every pore of his body. No matter what kind of energy it was, as long as it passed through his body, it would be sucked into his body by the black whirlpool, turning into extremely pure and powerful saint energy. His body and soul were absorbing the holy power. Countless holy words appeared in space and merged with his body. His body and soul were both growing rapidly. His life force was growing rapidly. Wu-Chi felt that he had never been in such a good condition. He could not be better. The core area where the Buddhists and Taoists were fighting was still pitch black. No one could tell what would happen after they risked their lives. But at the moment, Wu-Chi did not care about that. His cultivation was soaring. He learned many things in the boundless darkness. Especially since so many holy beings under the 6 Sky Kings of the Great Chaos Sky Formation were killed with one strike. The broken pieces of souls and the remaining powers of those holy beings were all devoured by him. Countless fragmented memories of holy beings flashed across his head. What he learned from billions of lives in Pan-gu world surged into his head. At the same time, Wu-Chi was sensing the billions of lives of holy beings in Pan-gu world. He was sensing their thoughts, their cultivation, and everything they had ever learned. What surprised Wu-Chi even more was that fresh pieces of souls flew out of the darkness from time to time. Buddhist sects, Taoist sects, and all sorts of other sects were available. Clearly, countless Buddhists and Taoists had fallen in the collision just now. Their soul pieces flew out along with the dark tide, but were all taken by Wu-Chi. Arhats, immortals, bodhisattvas, gold immortals, Buddhas, primordial immortals, world lords, zenith immortals. More and more soul pieces merged with Wu-Chi's soul, and more powers merged with Wu-Chi's body. Wu-Chi's body glowed with a dazzling light. He had become a bottomless pool, greedily devouring everything in the surroundings. Gradually, the light enveloped the darkness of annihilation, and the torrents of destruction caused by the collision were all devoured by Wu-Chi. Tens of thousands of spatial rifts accidentally approached this spiritual light, and the chaotic tides rushing out of the spatial rifts were immediately devoured by the spiritual light. Then, the spatial rifts themselves were also devoured by the spiritual light. Countless new ideas popped up in Wu-Chi's soul. Wu-Chi breathed deeply. Every time he breathed, a sky-devouring Holy Spirit fire would rise from his soul and merge all soul pieces into one. His soul had been growing at an amazingly high rate. The pre-world spirit, which he had merged with completely, was releasing its power. It devoured and stole everything, and its efficiency was so high and so high. Within 1/10,000th of a second, Wu-Chi's soul had already been strengthened by tens of thousands of times, and his ability of analysis and understanding had been improving speedily. Some inherited memories he gained from the Holy Palace of 7, which he still couldn't understand, had become so simple and clear. He could understand everything by scanning across the memories with his spirit power. His soul was growing at an incredible rate, and soon, the quantitative change began to change qualitatively. At the core of his purple-golden soul, tiny drops of mercury-like light began to condense, emitting a faint spirit light. These seemingly weak light drops were incredibly beautiful, and were filled with a mystical aura. As time went by, these faint light drops began to merge together and gradually formed into a tiny human figure. It was a tiny human figure that emitted a sparkling luster that looked like ground diamond dust. Wu Qi's soul had begun a formal transformation. From an ordinary soul, it had transformed into an existence whose nature matched that of a pre-world spirit, and should be called a spirit god. Spirit gods were existences that could never be destroyed in the boundless void. Once they possessed them, they would never be able to die again. If not for the crazy battle between the Buddhist League and the Taoist League, which resulted in the death of so many holy immortals and Buddhas, with only the speed of cultivation of Wu Qi, only God knew how many eons it would take for him to accumulate enough power of his soul to transform into a spirit god. The speed at which the soul fragments surged into Wu Qi's spirit god grew faster and faster, and the devouring force on the surface of his body grew stronger and stronger. From the darkness, a great amount of golden and purple streams kept rushing out. Those were the powerful energies released by the almighty experts of the Buddhist League and the Taoist League when their bodies collapsed. Without hesitation, Wu Qi swallowed these energies into his body. At the same time, his fleshly body was undergoing a bizarre transformation. Not only his fleshly body, but also some soul fragments had been fused into it. Gradually, the nature of Wu Qi's fleshly body became somewhat similar to that of a spirit god. A more mystical fleshly body, a fleshly body that was more compatible with his spirit god, and a fleshly body that could unleash a stronger force with every move. Especially, countless tiny runes were constantly condensing in midair, fusing into Wu Qi's body. The strength of his fleshly body was gradually growing stronger, and gradually, a bright light shone out from his body. The crisis of the complete destruction of his fleshly body and soul had temporarily passed, and the all-devouring darkness had failed to engulf Wu Qi. He slowly opened his eyes, raised his right hand, and made a grabbing motion toward the core of the collision between the Buddhist League and the Taoist League. Just now, his body was passively absorbing everything, but now, he was actively absorbing everything that was useful to him in the boundless darkness. Wisps of golden light came from all directions, gradually coming together a few feet in front of Wu Qi's forehead. Upon a closer look, one would find that the golden light was composed of countless runes. As time passed, the tiny golden light had assembled into a three-layered, three-dimensional formation in front of Wu Qi. The 6 paths of reincarnation supported the earth, and the whole formation was perfectly round, full of an indescribable sense of perfection. The grand formation of great heaven had collapsed, and all the divine experts below the 6 celestial emperors had been wiped out. In addition, the 6 netherworld emperors and all the netherworld Buddhas in the camp of the Buddhist League had also been annihilated. Daozu had also summoned all the Yin gods from all over Pangu continent, but now, all of them had been wiped out in the violent collision. Most of the divine beings in the 3 worlds were dead. Their divine bodies and souls were shattered, and Yuan Ling was killed as well. However, their divine power of the heavenly Tao still existed. From the boundless darkness, Wu Qi gathered the shattered divine power of the heavenly Tao and reformed it into the divine painting of heavenly Tao. In his spiritual ocean, the spirit god had completely replaced the original divine soul. With a slight thought, the spirit god's enormous divine will envelop the entire Pangu world like flowing water. The divine painting of heavenly Tao hovering in front of Wu Qi was emitting wisps of golden light, constantly connecting with the surrounding space in a strange way. After Pangu formed his true body, the divine painting of heavenly Tao in Pangu world suddenly became countless times more complicated. That was because Pangu had merged all the laws he had comprehended during his deep sleep into Pangu world. Compared to the newly born Great Tao of Pangu world, the divine painting of heavenly Tao made by the Buddhist League and Tao League was so simple and crude. However, Wu Qi's divine will had been drawing the newly born Great Tao of Pangu world from all directions, constantly perfecting the divine painting of heavenly Tao in front of him. Pangu, this world is my hometown, too. You can't make all the decisions. While complaining, Wu Qi quickly perfected the design of the divine painting of heavenly Tao according to his will. 9 was the extreme of number, so all the elements of the newly born divine painting of heavenly Tao had to be related to 9. There were 9 levels of heaven, and each level had a divine emperor. The 9 divine emperors formed the core of the future divine gods of Pangu world. The earth had 9 levels, and Pangu world would be divided into 9 parts. The bottom 3 levels were inhabited by all kinds of spirit creatures, ghosts, spirit creatures, and water spirits. The middle 3 levels were inhabited by immortals, ranging from Jin Dan level to Tao-breaking level of golden immortals. As long as they were free immortals, they would all live in the top 3 levels. The upper 3 levels were inhabited by ordinary human beings, winged men, mermaids, and longbow country people. The netherworld was also divided into 9 levels, and in each level, there would be a netherworld emperor to judge whether a soul was good or evil. The good ones would be sent directly into the 6 paths of reincarnation, while the evil ones would be cultivated in the netherworld. In the heaven, earth, and netherworld, there would be countless divine positions. The heaven had the heaven and earth, the earth had the human emperor, the netherworld had the emperor, and the mountain god, the earth god, and the earth god. With his tremendous spirit power, Wuqi's entire body was soaked in cold sweat. He was crazily writing all the rules of the new divine painting of heavenly Tao. The ranks of heaven, earth, and netherworld were clearly defined, and the upper and lower levels were extremely strict. But, one's overall strength did not necessarily mean that one was in a high position, for the mountain god and the earth god might also have the overall strength of a gold immortal, or even higher. There was no absolute suppression between the upper and lower levels of the divine realm, and it all depended on one's overall strength. For example, if one was a celestial emperor, and nominally had a number of righteous gods as his subordinates, whether or not these gods would obey his orders depended on his means and personal ability. With just the title of a celestial emperor, one could not command any god to do anything for him, because he did not have the power to force them to obey his orders, and no heavenly rule could guarantee that his orders would be obeyed by everyone. In this way, just like an emperor in the mortal world, his subjects could rebel, overthrow the rule of a celestial emperor, and even kill him with a blade and send him to the transmigration to be reincarnated if they did not like him. Although his spirit body, Yuan Ling, was still protected by the divine throne of heavenly Tao and could not be killed completely, there was no heaven-defying treasure like the deification pool to help him rebuild his divine body. If a celestial emperor was overthrown by his subjects and sent to the transmigration to cultivate himself again, he could forget the past, and still remember everything that happened in his previous life. However, if you want to take revenge and take back the throne of the celestial sovereign, then you will have to slowly cultivate from the beginning, step by step, from an ordinary mortal. As long as Yuan Ling was alive, he would have to take revenge one day. In this way, how much more fun would the world be? Suddenly, Wuqi burst out laughing. His laughter was filled with mischief and evilness. While Pan Gu wasn't around, he hurriedly finished the new drawing of Great Tao and merged it into the Great Tao of Nature of Pan Gu world. Once it became a fact, not even Pan Gu could change it. The celestial court supported by Daozu was so boring. The celestial court was lifeless, and the 6 celestial emperors were always in power, except during apocalypses. All the rules of the celestial court were so rigid, not interesting at all. But now, the celestial emperors could be killed, and the throne of celestial emperors could be snatched away. How many fun things would happen in the future? All divine beings had to be reincarnated into the cycle of reincarnation after they were slain, but they were able to forget their past and easily start cultivating again as mortals. They would definitely seek revenge on their enemies, and how much fun would that bring? While laughing evilly, Wuqi simply decided on the names of the 9 celestial emperors. The 6 celestial emperors were indeed the best choices. Lu Bang, who left a deep impression on Wuqi, was also thrown into the divine drawing of Great Tao by Wuqi, and became the 9th celestial emperor. Next was Ao Buzan, the troublemaker. Wuqi appointed him as the 1st celestial emperor, with the highest position. Ao Buzan was supported by the army of dragons, who were loyal to him. Therefore, his position as the celestial emperor was extremely stable, and he would certainly fill the new celestial court with endless life and joy. As the last celestial emperor, Wuqi delightfully threw this great benefit to Lao Ai. Ao Buzan, who always wanted to see the world plunged into chaos, Lao Ai, who was also not a good person, and Lu Bang, who was ambitious and never wanted to be under anyone. With these 3 celestial emperors together, the future celestial court would definitely be very happy. Then came the candidates for the 9 celestial emperors. Wu Qi confirmed that each celestial emperor was assisted by 28 legions of upright gods, and each of them was assisted by 120,000 celestial lords, as well as countless celestial lords, divine generals, celestial lords, and spirit officers. Daqin did not have a good relationship with any of the kingdoms. Therefore, the 28 legions of upright gods under Ing Zheng's command were Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, Lin Xiangru, Lian Pe, and a few other wonderful figures. As Chu Ping was a noble and elegant man, Wu Qi had given him a group of good men, including Li Si, Lu Buwei, Lord Longyang, and a few others. It was the same for the other few celestial emperors. Apart from Ao Buzan, who had a group of loyal dragons as his subjects, all the direct subordinates of the other 8 celestial emperors had been beaten to a pulp by Wu Qi. Those who had deep enmity with each other had to be put together, and those who had personal enmity with each other had to be made the leader and deputy. On the other hand, Liu Bang enjoyed the special treatment given by Wu Qi. The leader of all the celestial emperors under his command was none other than Xiang Yu, the former hegemon king of Western Chu. Meanwhile, Yu Ji, who had been brought back to Xiang Yu's side, and now had the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal, was assigned by Wu Qi to manage the logistics of Liu Bang's Palace of Fragrance. All in all, in Wu Qi's great divinity investiture this time, he would do whatever he wanted to do, no matter how uncomfortable it was. With Liu Bang, Lao Ai, and 6 other celestial emperors, and their trusted subordinates all in disorder, it would be a magnificent scene of a chaotic war between the 8 dynasties once the position of the celestial throne was determined. After the sacredness of the celestial court was confirmed, the candidate for the human emperor in the mortal world was still Emperor Haozuan of Deyu. In Wu Qi's opinion, the rules of Deyu were not bad. For generations, the people of Deyu had lived a good life, so he decided to let them continue to multiply. As for the 9 nether emperors of the nether world, Wu Qi through Gui Tunluo, Taisher Demon, Desolate Emperor, and Bai Ling Empress, as well as Prince Chang Qin and Gao, who were friends with Wu Qi. The last 3 candidates were given to Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, and Lu Qingfeng by Wu Qi. There were also the positions of the Nether Realm and the Nether Realm. Wu Qi had a large number of subordinates at his disposal, so he assigned those who had followed him for so many years to good positions. They were the kind of people who could sit at home and enjoy life, and would not be involved no matter how fierce the war in the outside world was. Moreover, he had deliberately left a backdoor in the divine portrait of heavenly Tao for these people. If they wanted to continue with their priesthood, they could do so, and if they did not, they could slip away at any time and continue their carefree and happy lives. Even with the mighty power of Wu Qi's spirit god, it took him the time to finish a pot of tea to complete the divine drawing of heavenly Tao. At the moment, Pangu was not in Pangu world, and the Wahuang clan was busy repairing Tianhen. Therefore, no one stopped Wu Qi from doing these things in secret. Glancing at the divine drawing of heavenly Tao floating in front of him with satisfaction, Wu Qi pushed it into the endless void. The small formation expanded with a boom, turning into countless beams of golden light that rushed into the void in all directions. Pangu world began to tremble violently. Streams of strong divine aura swept across the void, and many people found that they had gained an inexplicable power. The all-devouring darkness finally dissipated, and the elites of Buddhism and Taoism, who had fought with all their might, finally showed themselves. Chapter 1200. Black smoke rose from the barren mountains. Liu Bang, dressed in rags, leaned lazily against a grass nest dug out by a wild boar. With a straw in his mouth, he looked at Wu Xian, who was sitting beside him, with an indescribable gloating smile. Wu Xian, who had transformed into his human form, struggled and squirmed on the ground in pain. He wanted to maintain his human form, but his body was about to disintegrate. From time to time, turbid mucus sprayed out of his body. He wanted to completely transform into that monster, but 3 strange spikes had pierced deep into his body from the back of his heart. The spikes glowed with a strange evil light, making it impossible for him to control his body freely. The 3 spikes were shot into Wu Xian's body by someone when Ao Buzan led the army to hunt down Liu Bang and his companions. The spikes should have been refined from the venomous stingers of some marine poisonous beasts, mixed with some strange and unknown poison, so Wu Xian could not remove the terrifying poison. Wu Xian's body had been infected by the evil poison, and he was struggling to stay alive. Han Xian strode over and handed Lu Bang a bronze helmet filled with clean water. Lu Bang took the helmet, took a gulp of water, and said with a strange laugh, "Wu Xian, you are the Grand Magus of the Forbidden Clan and a famous figure among the human race. Can this little bit of poison stop you?" Wu Xian looked up in pain and spat a mouthful of sticky black saliva at Lu Bang. His body was being corroded by the poison, and he felt his life force rapidly draining away. He glared at Lu Bang with resentment and muttered in a low voice, "Don't be too happy just yet. When those lords come back, you'll be in for a good time. Lu Bang, you've lost all of your shaman army and ruined the plans of those lords. Think about how you'll die." Lu Bang smiled coldly. Just as he was about to tease Wu Xian, his body suddenly trembled. A strange dark golden divine light spread from his body, and a divine power filled him. An eye-piercing dark light burst out from Lu Bang's chest. He tore open his shirt, revealing a hideous devil face on his chest, which was being devoured by the dark golden light. The seal that had troubled him for a long time was being erased by an unstoppable force. Wu Xian was horrified. "What is this thing?" he asked in a hoarse voice. It was not just Lu Bang. Han Xian and the others, who were standing next to him, were all glowing gold. The restrictions placed on their chests by the world breakers were melting. In just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the seals on Lu Bang and the others were all broken, and an unprecedented strength filled their bodies. Lu Bang had fused all of the powers of his 9 clones, and his power was comparable to that of a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. Now that he was being stimulated by that unknown power, his entire body shuddered, and it was as if a fragile membrane had suddenly been broken through, thereby elevating his cultivation base to a whole new level. This is... Lu Bang was overjoyed at first, but then he was shocked. What kind of joke is this? He scolded angrily. I was actually forcibly conferred the title of the 9th Celestial Emperor by the Heavenly Tao. Among the 9 Celestial Emperors, I'm actually the lowest. Huh? What is this? What is this? Where have all my trusted subjects been transferred to? My Prime Minister is actually Xiang Yu. The faces of Han Xian, Zhang Liang, Xiao He, and the others darkened. They had all received a message from the Heavenly Tao that they had been conferred the title of Heavenly Divinity, and had been transferred to serve under the other Celestial Emperors. Zhang Liang, Xiao He, and the others were fine, but Han Xian had been transferred to serve under Ing Zheng, the Emperor of Qin, as the Deputy General of Baiqi, the Heavenly Slaughter General of the 9 Heavens. Does the person who conferred the title of God have a grudge against us? Han Xian roared angrily, but his roar just happened to reveal the truth. Lu Bang jumped to his feet and stepped on Wu Xian's head. He gritted his teeth and looked at the void, which was covered with countless cracks, and muttered in a low voice, "Who has such a heaven-defying means to forcibly reverse the conferment of God set up by the joint efforts of Buddhism and Tao League? Not only that, but he also has complete control over the heavenly divinity position. His strength is simply unimaginable." Han Xian and the others looked at each other, cold sweat trickling down their foreheads. But Lu Bang suddenly burst out laughing. He raised his sword and threw his head back as he said, "So what? I'm now the Celestial Emperor of the 9th Heaven. Fine, fine, heroes of the 6 dynasties, I've been looking forward to fighting you for many years. Let me see if you, the heroes of the 6 dynasties, are worthy of your illustrious reputation. Xiang Yu, you're just my Prime Minister, you." Just when Lu Bang was about to wreak havoc on the 9 heavens in a heroic manner, another string of information came to him. Lu Bang was completely dumbfounded, and so were Han Xian and the others. What was this? Could a heavenly divinity position be so outrageous? Xiang Yu had already been appointed as Lu Bang's prime minister, so why was he still conferred the title of the great emperor of mountains and rivers, ruling over all the mountain gods, earth gods, city gods, and water gods? Originally, Liu Bang could easily toy with his prime ministers, but now that he had his own subordinates, it would be strange if Xiang Yu did not fight to the death with Liu Bang. Damn it! Who the hell is making fun of me like this? Making fun of Lao Tzu. Liu Bang was so angry that he broke out cursing. He did not even bother to show the demeanor of an emperor anymore. Then, he stomped hard on Wu Xian's head and pushed it into the ground. Just as Liu Bang was about to curse the 18 generations of ancestors of the man who had secretly conferred the title of God, a terrible pressure came crashing down from the sky, causing everyone to lie flat on the ground subconsciously. In the void, the endless darkness suddenly dissipated, and 16 figures appeared in the void. The Buddhist League and Tao League had gathered all their elite disciples and forces to launch a full-force attack. On the surface, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs still had their golden bodies intact, but there was no longer a single disciple around them. The lotus-shaped Buddhist kingdoms around the Buddhist patriarchs withered, while the souls of countless believers in the Buddhist kingdoms perished and all their clones turned into smoke. The lotuses above Daozu's heads fell, and the 9 clones were all turned into nothingness by the attack. The two sides looked at each other from less than a mile away. After a long time, purple-browed Daozu sighed in a low voice and said, "Why have you come to this? Your innate spirits have been taken away. Why do you have to go to this extent? You must know that by leaving us a way out, you are leaving us some leeway. Why do you have to go to this extent?" Buddha guarding heart sighed softly, his eyelids drooping as he said, "Why have you come to this extent? You and I were fortunate enough to obtain the innate spirits from the chaos. We have made countless plans, all so that we can finally fuse with the innate spirits and truly transcend the mortal world and become saints. Just as we were about to succeed, all our efforts were in vain, and even our innate spirits were taken away." A crisp cracking sound rang out as the upper eyelid of Buddha guarding heart's left eye suddenly disintegrated and shattered. Specks of golden light drifted out from under the broken eyelid, drifting in an arc and drifting away. Accompanied by a constant cracking sound, from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, Buddha guarding heart's golden body shattered inch by inch, and countless specks of golden light kept drifting out. Buddha guarding heart sighed softly, shaking his head and saying, "You can't say that you have the hope of transcending the mortal world and becoming saints, while we are just ordinary people. If we can't do it, why can't you?" Loud cracking noises kept ringing out as the divine will of developing heaven disintegrated with 7 Buddhist patriarchs. Large pieces of debris shot out in all directions like a meteor shower. The enormous will of 6 paths of reincarnation let out a deep rumble as it slowly sank into the void and returned to the netherworld where it belonged. Faint cracking noises kept ringing out as the golden bodies of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs began to disintegrate at the same time. With a despairing and sad smile on their faces, they closed their eyes, put their palms together, and began to recite a very ancient and elegant scripture. The 9 Daozu patriarchs looked quietly at the 7 old friends who had been friends for countless years and had fought against each other for countless years. Crisp cracking noises kept coming from around them as the 9 colored lotuses beneath them began to disintegrate. Wisps of clear air spread out in all directions, healing the cracks in the void wherever they passed. The long-browed Daofather's body trembled slightly, and a few thin lines of blood suddenly appeared on his jade-white face. His skin began to disintegrate, and then the flesh beneath his skin began to turn into black-gray ash, scattering in all directions along with the disintegration of the lotus flower. First, Daozu patriarchs suffered the same fate, then Daozu patriarchs, and finally, even purple-browed Daozu patriarchs, who had the strongest cultivation base, had a spiderweb-like line of blood on his forehead. He sighed faintly and said with a bitter smile, "How did things come to this? In fact, you and I have been planning for countless years, and we have 100% chance of success in our plan to become a god." Buddha guarding heart smiled bitterly, then shook his head and said, "Yes, you have 100% chance of success, but that is only your 100% chance. Tao League is in charge of the celestial court and the human emperor, and you still want to intervene in the underworld. The power of the great path is in your hands. Do you think we have 100% chance of success?" They stared at each other. Then, Buddha guarding heart said gloomily, "You and I have been scheming and fighting against each other for so many years. You know me, and I know you. If you succeed, all of us will die without a burial place. If we succeed, all of you will be turned into ashes. After a moment of silence, purple-browed Daozu Patriarch said with a bitter smile, in fact, 70% of the elites we have ambushed are prepared to deal with Pangu. If Pangu did not appear, and if you Buddhism did not act on your own, things would not have developed to this point. Buddha Guarding Heart nodded and said, we have hidden so many disciples, one for Pangu, and the other for you. You and I both want to monopolize all the benefits, so how can we allow others to compete with us? Even if Pangu does not appear, will you let us go? Sooner or later, this day will come. It is only a matter of time. The speed at which the Buddhist ancestor and Tao ancestors' golden bodies disintegrated increased. Even their souls were severely injured. If not for the fact that they were all Tao fusing experts, and that their natal Yuan Ling had merged with the great path of heaven, their souls would have been destroyed by now. Both sides were on guard against each other. The elite forces that had been hidden for countless years struck with all their might, and the result was that both sides were severely injured. The Buddhas were severely injured, and the Daozu were slightly injured. That was all. Wuqi's divine sense covered the entire Pangu world, and he found 16 faint light spots in the endless torrent of the great path of heaven. He looked down at Daozu and Buddha, pondered for a long time, and finally, he gently pushed out his palm. The 16 light spots were forcibly separated from the torrent of the great path of heaven, and the faces of the 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists suddenly changed. Chapter 12:01. 16 beams of dim light slid across the void and slowly injected into the bodies of Buddha and Daozu, whose golden bodies had collapsed and were left with only their souls. At the level of Tao fusing, even if their golden bodies completely collapsed, the strength of the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists would only be weakened by about 40%. Their souls would still be able to exert more than 60% of their power, but their defensive power would be greatly weakened. However, the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists, who still maintained their above-average strength, looked at the beams of light that were injected into their bodies stiffly. Ripples kept appearing on the surface of their immortal souls, as if they were trembling violently. If not for the fact that their souls did not have this function, they would have been drenched in sweat by now. They were Yuan Ling, who had merged with the great Tao of Pangu world. Yuan Ling, who had been branded in the core of their souls and recorded all their information, had returned to their bodies. In this way, they were no longer Tao-fusing saints, but ordinary mighty figures whose magic power and divine abilities were thousands of times stronger than those at the peak of the Tao-breaking realm. Without the support of immortality and Yuan Ling, who had merged with the great Tao, what kind of Tao-fusing saints were they? Especially at the critical moment when their golden bodies had collapsed and their souls had been seriously injured, if Yuan Ling had returned, wouldn't that be the same as killing them? Looking at Wuqi, who stood above them with his hands clasped behind his back, a chill rose from the hearts of the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists, and they could not help but shiver. After a long time, Buddha Guarding Heart finally asked in a dry voice, "What do you want, fellow Taoist?" Well. Wuqi pondered for a long time. He had a lot to say, but he could not find where to start. Tilting his head and thinking for a long time, he nodded slowly and said, "I don't agree with your philosophy of cultivation. I don't agree with your methods of doing things. And I don't agree with everything about you. To put it simply, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. I don't like everything about you." The faces of the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists darkened, and a faint spiritual light appeared around them. Their divine senses cautiously swept toward Wuqi, wanting to see how strong he was and why he could separate their Yuan Ling from the torrent of the great Tao. Even Pan Gu, who created this world, couldn't do this, could he? How could he do this? I've seen the ancient immortals around Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. Wuqi smacked his lips and nodded. Very good immortals. Although they live long lives, they are free and unfettered. They do not covet power, they do not covet wealth, they do not covet hegemony, they do not seek to control everything from a high and mighty position. Letting out a sigh, Wuqi shook his head and said, "I just don't understand." We are all cultivators, but why do you Buddhist League and Taoist League incite the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the men? Why would an apocalypse of heaven and earth befall upon you? Aren't you a little too greedy? Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said sternly, with your shrewdness and means, if you had been meditating on the innate spirits you obtained since the creation of Pangu world, why can't you fuse with them by now? At least, Pangu has done it, and even the Huang clan has done it. But what about you? You established Buddhist League and Taoist League, rejected the dissidents, killed the chaos fiends who had the same origin as you, and even fought against each other. You made Pangu world a mess, so much so that the great Tao of nature actively rejected your disciples and sent down apocalypses to kill them all from time to time. Do you want the real immortality? Do you want the real transcendence? Or are you crazy? Hearing Wu Qi's words, purple eyebrow Daozu's face darkened. Kid, what do you know? He yelled angrily. Wu Qi spread his hands and sneered, I know nothing. I only know that you are stupid enough to kill each other. Now, both of you are injured, and I have taken advantage of you for no reason. He took a deep breath, and with a sway of his body, he transformed into Lord Yuan Ling's true form. Greetings, old friends, he said coolly, Yuan Ling offers greetings. Let's settle what happened in the past one by one. Staring at the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Taoists, whose faces had changed dramatically, Wu Qi said ferociously, let's not talk about what kind of person I, Wu Qi, am in this life. Let's talk about how I, Yuan Ling, was with you in my previous life. Didn't you exchange all the spirit pills you needed from me? What happened in the end? You joined hands and almost destroyed my soul. If it had not been for the help of the Huang clan and Pangu, Yuan Ling would no longer exist in the world. Yuan Ling, how dare you? Buddha Shuyi cried out harshly. A beam of light darted out of Wu Qi's forehead. A rune containing the power of annihilation flew out and struck heavily on Buddha Shuyi's chest. Buddha Shuyi gave a muffled snort. Suddenly, a strong light burst out of his body, and his soul, which was already badly injured, disintegrated. Buddha Shoshin roared furiously. With a flip of his right palm, he made a grabbing motion towards Buddha Shuyi's disintegrated soul, forcibly pulling out Yuan Ling, who was about to be crushed. Buddha Shoshin drew back with the other Buddhist patriarchs and cried out, Yuan Ling, it was our fault in the past. Now that things have come to this, we have nothing more to say. From today on, we 7 brothers will leave Pangu world and live in seclusion in the chaos, never to see you again. What do you think? Wu Qi sneered, nodded, and said, all right, I won't kill you. The faces of the 6 Buddha patriarchs darkened as they turned into beams of light and tried to flee. But suddenly, 9 pitch-black tails with sharp, venomous hooks shot out and pierced deep into the souls of the Buddha patriarchs. Poisonous energy quickly spread throughout their bodies, causing them to howl in pain. Their souls quickly withered, and soon, they disappeared without a trace. 9 Tails burped heartily and spat out 7 Yuan Lings. He stared greedily at the 7 Yuan Lings, drooling. But, Wu Qi had ordered him to leave these treasures behind, so he dared not to devour them. What a pity, all the insights of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs over the years were in them. If he could devour these 7 Yuan Lings, he felt that his intelligence would increase by at least 7 or 8 times. Ignoring the howls and curses of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, Wu Qi sneered at the unsightly faces of the 9 Daozu and said, hand over Greathorns' Yuan Lings, and these 7's Yuan Lings will be yours. Hee, don't talk about a life and death struggle. Don't you want to get rid of the culprit who brought you to this point with your own hands? Purple-browed Daozu raised his long brows. With a wry smile on his face, he slowly threw the bracelet with great horns and the other 8 Dao fusing experts suppressed in it to Wu Qi. As Wu Qi kept his promise, he threw Yuan Lings to purple-browed Daozu. Next to him, Daozu hissed furiously, grabbed the 7 Yuan Lings and shoved them into his mouth, then began to chew them like a wild beast. The 7 Buddha ancestors screamed at the top of their lungs, but their screams soon died down, and gradually, there was no more sound. Looking into the void, purple-browed Daozu sighed and said, you're right, old monster Yuan Ling. If we hadn't been fighting, scheming against each other, I'm afraid we would have fused with the innate spirit over the years. His face suddenly turned extremely venomous as Daozu gritted his teeth and said, but there are 7 of them, and it's because of them that we dare to meditate in seclusion to comprehend the mysteries. If we don't completely suppress them, how can we dare to meditate in seclusion? Taking a deep breath, Dao Father Violet Brow let out a furious howl, his entire body trembling. We have to scheme one step at a time, 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 one step at a time. Pointing his finger in the direction of the heavens beyond heaven, purple-browed Daozu said fiercely, not only the 7 of them, but also Nuwa, Fushi, and Pangu. They are on the same side. We must leave enough power to guard against them, and we must accumulate enough power to guard against them. Otherwise, how can we meditate in seclusion? How can we do that without taking complete control of Pangu world? The cracks in the void gradually disappeared, and the sky was filled with pale yellow particles of breathing soil, which were constantly fusing with the void to strengthen the spatial structure. A beam of light drifted up into the sky as Wahuang Clan came to the side of the crowd with the myriad spirit cauldron hovering over her head. She just so happened to hear Dao Father Violet Brow's berserk roar. She couldn't help but shake her head repeatedly. How laughable. Violet Brow, if it wasn't for the fact that you went too far, why would we ever try to scheme against you? Purple-browed Daozu sneered, tilted his head scornfully, and said, of course, you're saying so now. Wahuang Clan slightly shook her head and said blandly, I, Yuan Ling, swear that I didn't start to be wary of you until you incited the forbidden kind to betray the humankind. Before that, we really didn't take any precautions against you. Purple-browed Daozu's face froze instantly, and so did the faces of the other 8 Daozu. They glanced at each other. If they hadn't lost their golden bodies, they would have vomited blood in anger. For a long time, they had regarded the 7 Buddhist ancestors as their most direct enemies, but their ultimate opponents, the strongest enemies in their hearts, had always been Pangu and Wahuang Clan. However, Wahuang Clan swore in the name of Yuan Ling that if the 7 Buddhist ancestors and the 9 Taoists had not taken the initiative to provoke the humankind, Pangu and Wahuang Clan had no intention of going against them at all. This was the truth, and no one dared to swear in the name of Yuan Ling. In other words, purple-browed Daozu's face was ashen. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. I see. If we're willing to live in seclusion. Before his voice faded away, a long tail suddenly pierced through the foreheads of the 9 Daozu. 9 tails happily absorbed the vast and pure magic power from the souls of the 9 Daozu, while Wuqi used the brick to suppress their every move. 9 congenital spirits flew out of the 9 Daozu's bodies. Wuqi opened his mouth and inhaled, and 9 beams of light quickly flew into his mouth. Wahuang Clan's expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and was about to stop the 9 beams of light. Pangu could give Wuqi 3 congenital spirits, but that was because he needed Wuqi's help. But these 9 congenital spirits originally belonged to the Daozu, and Wahuang Clan already had a suitable candidate in mind. But, as soon as Wahuang Clan made her move, the 5-colored divine light brushed down from right in front of her face. The space around Wahuang Clan suddenly turned into a ball of boiling porridge. Her fingertips touched the chaotic space, and a strange heat went straight into her palm, almost burning it. Wahuang Clan was startled and hurriedly pulled back her hand. The 5-colored light abruptly shone around her, and Xia had already come behind Wahuang Clan, pressing her little hand against Wahuang Clan's back. Holy Mother, Empress Hua, you are indeed the Holy Mother of the humankind, and both the Fiend Emperor and Sister Zi Xian owe you a favor, but Xia was born in the chaos. But I was born in the chaos, and I'm the fiend ancestor of the extraterritorial heavenly devils, so I don't have any psychological burden about killing her. A bone-chilling evil power slowly invaded Wahuang Clan's back, almost freezing her heart and meridians. Let's have a bet, said Xia. Can you snatch the 9 congenital spirits? And let's have a bet, can I kill your Yuan Ling? Wahuang Clan's body stiffened, and she dared not to move. If the person who restrained her was Wu Qi or Princess Zhanglu, she would not be afraid at all. But as for Yi Xia, she really dared not to move. As Yi Xia said, she was indeed the holy mother of the humankind, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu were both human beings in this life. But what did the humankind have to do with Yi Xia? She didn't need to care about Huang clan at all. Two mighty Renhuang auras rushed out from the side. The Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and the Yen Emperor Shenong, who had been hiding, attacked Qixia from the left and right. Emperor Huang Xianyuan shouted, "Demoness, take your hand away." But before the two sacred emperors could reach Yi Xia, Ao Buzan and Lord Xianqing had already stood in front of them. Ao Buzan shook his thighs and looked at Xianyuan with a smile. "You are the sacred emperor of the human race, but Lao Tzu is the ancestor of the dragons, so Lao Tzu doesn't have to give you face." TSK, I heard that the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan attained the Tao by having 3,000 concubines. TSK, how many concubines have I had over the years? Xianyuan could only smile wryly. He had no confidence in dealing with a freak like Ao Buzan. In terms of seniority, Ao Buzan had the identity of Arko Zulong. Although he was the sacred emperor of the human race, what could he do to the ancestor of the dragons? Shenong, the Yen emperor, could do nothing to Lord Xianqing either. Not only was Lord Xianqing here, but Catfish was also staring at them with a big hammer. Looking at the hammer, which was as big as a hill, Shenong felt dizzy. Huang clan gave a wry smile and shook her head gently. "Yuan Ling, my old friend, this is your fate," she said coolly. Wu Qi opened his mouth and swallowed the 9 beams of light, then turned to Huang clan and said helplessly, "You can't blame me for this. I have too many friends and family, so I have to leave them a chance. Besides, Zhanglu is pregnant with my eldest son, so I have to leave him a chance." Laughing dryly, Wu Qi turned to Yi Xia, whose face was unsightly, and said helplessly, "Yi Xia, our child. Just forget about it. The innate spirit is not like the leeks in the field, and there can't be so many of them." Wu Qi felt a headache when he thought of the huge number that Yi Xia had given birth to 360,000 fiend seeds. Prepare an innate spirit for each fiend seed's child. That was simply impossible. The souls of the 9 Daozu had been devoured by 9 tails, and their son, Yuan Ling, had become her tonic. The screams in the void had completely disappeared. Wu Qi and Huang clan stood facing each other across the vast void. After a long silence, Huang clan nodded slowly and said, "My old friend, Yuan Ling, are you going to stay here for a long time?" Wu Qi nodded and said, "Yes. In my previous life, Yuan Ling was a boring man. My best memories are all in the mortal world, so I'm going to settle down here." Before Huang clan could say anything, Wu Qi continued slowly, "I won't interfere with too many things in this world, but I don't want too many things to interfere with me either. The current situation is very good, very good. I think Pangu will agree with me." Huang clan rolled his eyes helplessly. The divine map of heavenly Tao had been fixed. Unless the world collapsed again and the heavenly Tao was completely thrown into chaos, even with Huang clan's mighty divine ability, he could not fix the divine map of heavenly Tao. Just like Wu Qi said, the current situation was very good. Even if Huang clan did not think it was good, unless Buddhism and Taoism died together and destroyed the world, it would be difficult to fix the divine map of heavenly Tao. Sighing, Huang clan nodded and said, "Then, let's do this. As long as Pangu approves, that is good." Wu Qi smiled relaxedly. Pangu is a generous and chivalrous man. He will approve of it. Looking up at the sky, Wu Qi quietly said, "Now, the last problem is the world breaker. I will go and help Pangu." Laughing, Wu Qi waved his hand and tore open the void. He stepped inside. Chapter 1202. In the chaos, Pangu was laughing crazily. He waved his big axe and chased after the 13 break world people. But sometimes, Pangu would chase after Shatu and hack madly. When Shatu's armor was broken, Pangu would immediately turn around and hack Shiyang. When Shuyang's face turned pale and she howled in pain, Pan Gu would excitedly chase after End Dragon. The 13 Break World people did not want to fight Pan Gu. They all wanted to run away from the restriction. They still wanted the pre-heaven spirits of the 9 Daozu. If they could take one pre-heaven spirit, they could become truly immortal. They did not want to waste time there. Pan Gu's restriction was very strong. No matter how hard they tried, they could not break the restriction and escape. Pan Gu was very fair when he distributed his attacks to them. It was a pity that the 13 Break World people who did not want to fight were stuck there. They all cried to the sky and cried to the ground. Pan Gu didn't attack fast. Instead, he simply hacked down slowly, one axe strike after another. Every strike of his axe hit the target's body. Every strike could weaken the World Breaker's power a little. As time passed, the Break World people were weakened by Pan Gu. When they woke up, Pan Gu had already reduced their power to the peak of Broken World. You! Endworm was furious. He angrily shouted, "A bunch of idiots! You are being tricked, and you do not even know it. He can only suppress 4 of us. Why are we all in the same situation? Let's work together to kill him. Otherwise, we will all be in trouble." The Break World people were born with the evil thoughts of the Holy World, but they were not stupid. Although they were blinded by greed, they only cared about running away. After Endworm's reminder and what had happened to them, they finally understood. The 13 Break World people roared and joined hands to attack Pan Gu. Pan Gu laughed. He nodded and said, "Whatever. I wanted to save some energy, but since you guys have woken up, I will have to use all my power." Along with his laughter, Pan Gu's body suddenly expanded to thousands of meters tall. From his head, a bright beam of light rose into the sky and poured down like a storm. Within the light, an extremely strong, hazy silhouette emerged. Take a look at the power of the Khanate spirit, Vajra, that I've just comprehended. Pan laughed strangely and said, "This is the real Vajra, not the Vajra of those little baldies from the Buddhist sects." A hot aura spread out from Pan Gu's body. He threw a punch. Among the Break World people, Sha Tu, who was said to be able to destroy everything with one sword, was sent flying away. His long sword was broken, and many pieces stabbed into his body. It made Sha Tu cry out in pain. The other 12 Break World elites used their secret skills to land on Pan Gu. They only created a few ripples around Pan Gu. They were unable to hurt his body. Waving the heavy axe, Pan Gu said in a deep voice, "If it were you who destroyed the sacred realm, I would be a little afraid. But now, since I already know your roots and know the ins and outs of your origins, how can I let you take advantage of me? Do you really want to be sealed for countless more years, waiting for countless more years to be reborn and form your true bodies again?" Zhong Bing gave a long roar and said harshly, "Do you really not covet that innate spirit at all? Let's fight him. I know you guys still have tricks up your sleeves." While he was screaming, Endho's presence suddenly exploded. Many sad screams came from the black air in Endho's head. Pan Gu's body shook. He looked at Endho in shock. His body was surrounded by many faces of men and women, old and young. Endho shouted, "Pan Gu! You are the Pan Gu who created that world. Since you have combined with an innate spirit, you should give it to me." His body exploded into a mass of black mist that flew toward Pan Gu. Endho screamed in extreme pain. It was not just Endho. The other 12 Break World people screamed. Their bodies exploded. They became a mass of black air that wrapped around a wriggling, ugly spell. They flew toward Pan Gu. Pan Gu raised his heavy axe. He looked at the 13 masses of black air that were flying toward him with a serious expression. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that it wasn't something easy to handle. He had been sleeping in Pan Gu's world for many years. He practiced the Enter Dream skill. From the broken memories he had, he saw many powerful beings in the Holy World fight against Break World people. They died to this black air. It was like a Break World person's trump card. It was a skill that could only be activated by activating the life Mark End had left in their bodies. Without a doubt, this skill was very powerful, but it was also very damaging to Break World people. Just as Pan-gu was about to clash with the Break World person's skill, a spirit light appeared next to Pan-gu. Wu-Chi walked out of that spirit light. Wu-Chi was taken aback when he saw the 13 balls of mist let out a long, shrill howl, and countless streams of evil aura shooting out from them at top speed. It was like he was shocked. Wu-Chi's right hand shook. A spirit light shot out of his sleeve. Wu-Chi screamed, "Oh, no. It was not easy for me to kill that old priest and take his heaven's spirit." Pan-gu's eyes brightened. He switched from defense to offense. He gathered all of his power on his heavy axe. 13 clumps of black smoke were supposed to pounce on Pan-gu, but Wu-Chi accidentally allowed one of the innate spirits to escape. The world breakers let out shrill laughs of surprise and joy at the same time as they leaped toward the innate spirit. After all, Break World people were the collection of all evil in the holy world. They were full of greed, betrayal, and evil. They were beasts that followed their instincts. The heaven's spirit was something that could make them crave. It would be strange if they did not fight for it. Wu-Chi and Pan-gu laughed. They looked at each other. Pan-gu swung his axe at Thousand Head. Wu-Chi waved his hand and unleashed a holy spell at him. The two of them worked together to break Thousand Head's body. They trapped Thousand Head, who was injured. The other Break World people ignored Thousand Head, who was being attacked by the two of them. They were all focused on the heaven's spirit. They madly attacked each other. They used all of their powers to attack each other. Evil, destructive powers surged in space. The 12 masses of black air were eating each other. Their powers were getting weaker and weaker. Wu-Chi and Pan-gu worked together to break them one by one. They trapped the 13 Break World people. When Endworm was trapped in a holy spell, Wu-Chi smiled at Pan-gu and said, "I will stay in Pan-gu's world for a long time. Don't blame me for taking over your territory." Pan-gu very generously slapped Wu-Chi on the shoulder. He smiled until his eyes became a line. "You just have to pay me some rent." Hey. That 100-fruit wine. How about 100,000 pounds a year?" Wu-Chi's face changed. He immediately threw a kick at Pan-gu. Pan-gu dodged the kick and laughed delightedly. "You are much more interesting than the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. It's true that I created Pan-gu world, but it's not my world alone. I, Pan-gu, never thought about having him all to myself, never. I just want to learn the great Tao. I just want to drink and sing. I just want to live a happy life." Looking at Wu-Chi seriously, Pan-gu said in a deep voice, "But, in the future, if something happens to Pan-gu's world, you cannot just sit and watch." Wu-Chi smiled and raised his hand. He bumped his palm against Pan-gu's. 30 years later, deep in the chaos, in front of the demon palace, where the undying demon soul of the Break World people were hiding, 2 lights suddenly flashed. Wu-Chi and Pan-gu finally arrived at the origin of all evils, which led to the destruction of the holy world and the birth of Pan-gu world. The 2 most powerful spirit gods in the boundless void, Mother and End, were still in a deep sleep. As long as the undying demon soul in the demon palace was wiped out, Pan-gu world would be safe for a long period of time. When Wu-Chi and Pan-gu were strong enough, even if Mother and End woke up again, they wouldn't be afraid of any threat. Facing the thick defensive screen outside the demon palace, Pan-gu raised his axe and attempted to break it. But, Wu-Chi stopped Pan-gu's violent action. With a smile on his face, he placed both hands on the restrictive barrier and quietly unleashed his power of theft, causing countless ripples to spread across the huge barrier like the surface of water. Gradually, Wu-Chi's body turned hazy. Countless tiny swirls surged out of his body and attached to the surface of the defensive screen, absorbing its power. Watching Wu-Chi absorb the entire defensive screen, Pan-gu couldn't help but twitch his mouth corners. He helplessly looked at the heavy axe in his hand. After a few years, Wuqi finally devoured all defensive screens outside the demon palace. He and Pan Gu grinned, then walked into the demon palace with big steps. 13 coffins were placed in the middle of the hall. The true spirits of the break world people had been cursing crazily from the flames in the lamps on the coffins. Wuqi and Pan Gu had actually found their undying soul seals. As long as they destroyed the seals, the break world people would no longer exist. Facing the crazy curses of the break world people, Pan Gu laughed out loud and released a hurricane, extinguishing all the flames on the lamps. The noises in the hall stopped abruptly. Faintly, countless bolts of lightning gathered in the air. It seemed that the ruins of the chaotic world, the holy world, had its own spirit, and was gathering its power to flatten this sinful land, which caused the collapse of the holy world. Before the thunderbolts gathered in the chaotic world exploded, Wuqi and Pan Gu hurriedly fled to Pan Gu world. Decades later, in the sky above the former human realm, 3 multicolored spheres of light shone simultaneously. Pan Gu raised his axe and drew a giant amount of chaos power from the chaos. He began carefully designing a primeval heaven, where he would build his dojo in the future. The 10,000 spirit cauldron floated above the Wahuang clan's head, shining with a bright light. It had also absorbed a giant amount of chaos power, and was preparing to build a new dojo in the future. The other sphere of light was from Wuqi, Princess Zhanglu, and Yi Xia. They moved immeasurable amounts of chaos power from the chaos together, and also tried their best to design the heaven where their families and friends would live. As for the name of the heaven where Wuqi would cultivate his mind in the future, because of the disagreement between Princess Zhanglu and Yi Xia, the name couldn't be decided yet. The thunderous bang caused by the creation of the heaven echoed through Pan Gu world. The warm light illuminated the entire growing world.